He was born with an incomplete soul, and because of that, no one can truly love him. Not his parents, not the doctors, not even the other patients. Until one day a mysterious man appears and, for the first time, doesn't recoil from him. A brilliant violinist, cursed with the very same rare condition. Together they discover something that should be impossible. Their souls resonate with each other, but their bond comes with a deadly price. Every second they spend together brings them closer to death. Then, a supernatural entity appears with a terrifying offer. Only one soul can be saved. The other will vanish forever. A boy who never truly got to live, and a man who never wanted to. Which one will choose to die for the other? The answer will break your heart. Watch the full video now to discover how this unforgettable story ends. If you're a real subscriber, leave a like and comment part 2 inches at the beginning of the video. Without further ado, let's get into the story. In the middle of an endless void, a mysterious voice speaks of peculiar souls born forever incomplete. Their curse begins with rejection. One example is a woman who believed she could love a child, only to end up hating him instead. Someone questions why those feelings even exist. The unseen voice answers that humans aren't the only ones who reject them. Every living creature does. Yeah, that's a rough spawn point. Elsewhere, a young boy sleeps peacefully in a hospital bed as the cosmic narrator reveals there is only one way to complete an unfinished soul. A close look at the boy's face shows calm eyes beneath closed lids and a faint blush as he remains lost in sleep. Moments later, he wakes, sits upright, and quietly stares off to the side, clearly disoriented. Barely above a whisper, he mutters, "No," as though arguing with whatever he witnessed in his dream. His feet meet the freezing hospital floor, and he rises while repeatedly telling himself it couldn't possibly be true. Denial speedrun activated. Gripping the doorway, he looks into the next room in complete shock, insisting everything before him is a lie. A nearby heart monitor erupts into frantic beeping as a countdown echoes through the room. 3, 2, 1. Inside, doctors desperately attempt to revive a patient, preparing the defibrillator for yet another shock. The boy watches from the doorway without the slightest expression while the machine's relentless beeping fills the hallway. The paddles slam against the patient's chest, sending another surge of electricity through his body in one last effort to save him. The man on the bed remains motionless beneath an oxygen mask, giving no response despite the medical team's efforts. Not exactly the hospital review you'd hope for. Tears finally well up in the boy's eyes as he turns away, repeating that it's all a lie, and that there had to be another way to fix everything. The scene shifts outside to the front of the massive hospital, where colorful autumn trees brighten an otherwise peaceful day. Inside a hallway, a short-haired blonde woman stands quietly, her distant gaze lost in thought. She lets out a sigh, closes her eyes, reminds herself to focus on the money, and silently calls herself Kay. After all, nobody pays better than that child's guardians. As she walks toward his room, Kay reflects that no other patient's family offers compensation anywhere close to theirs. She enters to find the boy calmly reading on his bed, revealing his name as Dohen. Walking over, she asks if he's reading again and suggests they spend some time reading together. The moment she gets close, though, an inexplicable wave of discomfort washes over her. Her own thoughts confuse her. Why does she dislike him when he's such a beautiful child? She recalls the whispers shared among the caregivers, that Dohen is an unsettling boy nobody wants to take care of. When she first heard those rumors, she brushed them aside, convinced she simply needed to help a child who had suffered at the hands of cruel people. Reality had other plans. She truly wanted to do her best, but caring for him proved far harder than she'd expected. Changing the topic, Kay asks what he's reading. Dohen tells her the book is called Demian. She offers him a choice between reading and playing instead. His face immediately lights up as he happily chooses to play. Seeing that innocent smile, Kay can't help thinking he really does seem like an adorable, sweet kid during moments like these. Dohyun points to a section of the book, declaring he'll play Sinclair while Kay takes the role of Crowmimmer. Smiling, she joins in and asks whether the story he told is actually true. With sparkling eyes, Dohyun presses a hand against his chest and confidently answers, "Of course. Zero hesitation, maximum commitment." The narration explains that the instant the game begins, Dohyun completely becomes Sinclair. Their roleplay follows Sinclair, a boy who lied just to fit in with other children, and Crowmimmer, the person who exploited those lies to manipulate him. Remaining fully in character, Dohyun admits he has no money but offers countless other things instead. Watching him perform, Kay stares in surprise, a faint blush creeping across her face. Every single time, his acting leaves her amazed. The narrator explains that once their performance starts, Kay herself seems to vanish, transforming into whatever character Dohyun needs. Side by side, they continue turning page after page, gradually disappearing into the world of the story together. Without warning, Dohyun suddenly drops the act. The air grows noticeably tense. He firmly closes the book and announces that today's performance is over, catching Kay completely off guard. After thanking her for playing with him, Dohyun smiles while Kay can only stare back, mentally exhausted and visibly dazed. She realizes it's happening again. Every session feels as though something takes control of her, before abruptly throwing her back into reality. Method acting went a little too method. A knock interrupts the silence, causing both of them to look toward the door. A smiling doctor in a white coat walks inside carrying a clipboard and greets them. He checks on Do-hyun first, asking how he's been feeling and whether he's continued taking his daily walks. Do-hyun confirms he visits the park across from the hospital every single day, much to the doctor's relief. The doctor then reveals he came because he has important news. He reminds Do-hyun about the patient in Korea whose symptoms closely matched his own. Do-hyun says he remembers. The doctor explains that, after learning about Do-hyun's case, that patient requested a transfer to this very hospital. Talk about choosing the same server. The transfer is scheduled for next week, leaving Do-hyun quietly lost in thought. Without saying a word, he concludes the other patient's condition must have gotten worse, if moving hospitals became necessary. The doctor confirms that continuing treatment in Korea had become extremely difficult. That's why the patient was transferred to the same hospital, treating Do-hyun. Before leaving, the doctor asks whether Do-hyun would like to meet him, mentioning that he's British too. Small world. Hospital edition. Later, Do-hyun stands outside the hospital, absent-mindedly staring at his phone. His blue eyes drift into the distance, barely focused on anything as the doctor's words replay in his head. A text from his mother fills the screen, apologizing that she and his father can't visit because work is keeping them away. Disappointed, Do-hyun gives up on his daily walk and decides to head straight back inside. Just then, he notices a man approaching from afar and assumes the new patient has finally arrived. Since they share the same illness, Do-hyun can't help wondering what kind of person he is. Then an odd sound snaps him out of his thoughts. The man suddenly stumbles, clutches his chest, and struggles desperately to breathe. Yeah, that's usually not a good sign. The narration explains that what happened next might have been pure coincidence, or destiny finally making its move. A lonely boy and a weary man lock eyes in the middle of the park during a meeting that was always meant to happen. Concerned, Do-hyun immediately rushes over to help. Seeing how much the man is suffering, he offers to call for assistance and tells him to hang on. Instead, the man gently grabs Do-hyun's shoulder and asks him not to. Plot twist. The patient refuses the hospital while standing next to a hospital. Confused, Do-hyun insists he can at least take him inside. The man declines again and simply asks for help reaching a nearby bench. With Do-hyun's support, he slowly sits down and finally manages to catch his breath. After recovering a little, he thanks the boy and admits he never expected to run into another Asian person so far from home. He introduces himself as Jung Hee-sung. Once Do-hyun shares his own name, Jung Hee-sung immediately realizes he's Korean. Delighted that they're from the same country, he chats with the boy, who curiously asks why he's staying at the hospital. Wearing a tired smile, Jung Hee-sung explains that he's suffering from an extremely rare illness. He even jokes that only 2 people in the entire world have it. Achievement unlocked. World's tiniest support group. The comment instantly makes Do-hyun realize this is the patient the doctor had mentioned. At the same time, he can't understand why Jung Hee-sung isn't uncomfortable around him like everyone else usually is. Jung Hee-sung calmly says he has no reason to feel uneasy. If anything, he says, Do-hyun is the one who seems nervous. With a warm smile, he reassures the boy that he doesn't need to worry because he's still just a child. Those words leave Do-hyun staring at him in complete surprise. He remembers how even his own parents struggled to be around him, making him wonder what makes this man so different. Heavy question, no easy answer. Before he can think any further, his phone suddenly rings, interrupting the moment. It's Kay. She asks where he disappeared to, and Do-hyun calmly replies that he only went for a walk through the park. Kay immediately scolds him, reminding him he's not allowed to wander around alone. Realizing he can't stay any longer, Do-hyun apologizes and says he's already on his way back. Jung Hee-sung asks if he snuck out. After getting a sheepish confirmation, he laughs and tells Do-hyun to hurry back before he gets into even more trouble. Fair advice. Nurses always win. When Do-hyun asks about him, Jung Hee-sung leans comfortably against the bench and says he should return to his own room as well. Later, the two ride the elevator together. Jung Hee-sung casually asks which floor Do-hyun is headed to. The 7th. That answer catches him off guard because he's staying there too. His room is 714, only a short distance from Do-hyun's. Talk about RNG putting them on the same map. The elevator doors slide open, and Jung Hee-sung tells Do-hyun they've arrived before stepping into the hallway. As he watches the man walk away, Do-hyun quietly realizes something feels different. For the first time in a long while, being around someone actually feels comfortable. But part of him is terrified the feeling won't last. He fears Jung Hee-sung will eventually start treating him the same way everyone else does. Just before entering his room, Jung Hee-sung turns back with an idea. Since their rooms are so close together, he invites Do-hyun to stop by anytime he has nobody to play with. The unexpected invitation leaves the boy completely speechless. Caught off guard and blushing slightly, Do-hyun happily accepts. Jung Hee-sung heads inside, leaving Do-hyun standing alone in the hallway. Once he's settled on his bed, Jung Hee-sung suddenly lets out a quiet gasp, as though he has just remembered something important. Sometime later, Do-hyun finally gathers the courage to visit room 714, hugging a book against his chest. The moment Jung Hee-sung sees him at the door, he welcomes him inside with a bright smile and invites him to sit beside the bed. Instead, Do-hyun quietly chooses the nearby chair, resting the book on his lap. Introvert behavior detected. Amused by the boy's reserved personality, Jung Hae-sung smiles and asks if he really spends all his time reading, and whether that's actually fun. Do-hyun dodges the question. Meanwhile, Jung Hae-sung glances at the book the boy brought him with absolutely zero enthusiasm. Noticing that reaction, Do-hyun forces an excited smile and insists that reading really is fun. Jung Hae-sung laughs, saying he's impressed because most kids Do-hyun's age would rather run around outside than sit with a book. He then mentions having a younger brother who's exactly the same age as Do-hyun. According to him, the kid is unbelievably adorable. Without missing a beat, Do-hyun bluntly replies that if his brother looks anything like him, there's no way he's actually that cute. Ignoring the joke aimed at him, Do-hyun smoothly changes the subject and asks whether Jung Hae-sung gets along with his little brother. The question wipes the smile from Jung Hae-sung's face. His expression turns unexpectedly serious, making Do-hyun wonder what happened. Then, without sugarcoating it, Jung Hae-sung admits that his younger brother actually hates him. Well, that escalated fast. Quietly flipping through his book, Do-hyun murmurs that he wishes Jung Hae-sung were his own brother. The unexpected compliment makes Jung Hae-sung smile. He asks why Do-hyun seems so fascinated by his brother before drifting into a story from the past. He admits he never cared much for babies. To him, they were just tiny humans whose main talent was crying at full volume. Valid complaint, honestly. Everything changed the day his brother was born. Out of simple curiosity, he visited the maternity ward to see the newborn. The baby was tiny, wrinkled, and looked exactly like every other newborn. Yet somehow, his soul was the most beautiful thing Jung Hae-sung had ever seen. He explains that, in that moment, he could actually see the baby's soul. Do-hyun listens with complete fascination. Jung Hae-sung continues, saying that a single glance was enough to make him realize something. No matter what happened in the future, loving that child would always be impossible to stop. That leaves Do-hyun completely confused. A second ago, Jung Hae-sung claimed his brother hated him. Unable to ignore the contradiction, Do-hyun points it out. Critical hit, direct damage. Jung Hae-sung freezes, caught completely off guard. Realizing he blurted it out too bluntly, Do-hyun hurriedly covers his own mouth. With a gentle smile and closed eyes, Jung Hae-sung assures him it's fine. He says he doesn't need his biological brother anymore. After all, there's already a little brother sitting right in front of him who likes him. That sentence leaves Do-hyun speechless. Smoothest adoption request ever. Trying to brighten the mood, Jung Hae-sung sits up and asks whether Do-hyun enjoys anything besides reading. Do-hyun quietly explains that he spent his entire life inside a hospital. Because of that, every game he knows comes from books. Jung Hae-sung is stunned. Do-hyun casually adds that he technically lived at home for about a month after birth, but he doesn't remember any of it. Hearing that, Jung Hae-sung shifts closer, wanting to speak to him more personally. Before he can continue, the bedroom door suddenly swings open. Doctor. Benjamin walks in and is surprised to find Do-hyun there. Seeing the two together, he smiles and says it's nice they've already met. Having someone nearby who shares the same suffering can make things much easier. The phrase same suffering immediately confuses Do-hyun. At that exact moment, a sharp pain shoots through his body, forcing him to bend over. Yeah, terrible choice of words, doc. Jung Hae-sung immediately scolds Benjamin for blurting that out. Do-hyun quickly defends the doctor, insisting he didn't mean any harm. Benjamin apologizes and asks if Do-hyun hadn't been told yet. The boy quietly answers that there simply hadn't been an opportunity. Feeling guilty, the doctor apologizes again before asking if Do-hyun has been hiding anything else. Do-hyun shakes his head. What else could I possibly hide when I've spent my whole life in a hospital? Benjamin sighs, admitting that's a fair point. The tension in the room eases a little. Then Do-hyun suddenly flips the conversation around. He asks Jung Hae-sung whether he's hiding any more secrets himself. Uno reverse card. Before Jung Hae-sung can answer, a nurse walks into the room, wondering what everyone's talking about. She approaches carrying medication and explains she's only there to replace Jung Hae-sung's bag. Then she gets a better look at his face. Her eyes immediately widen. Excited, she blurts out that he's the famous violinist she's heard so much about. Now it's Do-hyun's turn to pay very close attention. The nurse excitedly wonders whether she should ask a celebrity for an autograph. Meanwhile, Jung Hae-sung looks like he'd rather disappear. Do-hyun slowly turns toward him. The stare says everything. No dialogue required. Crossing his arms and puffing out his cheeks, the boy silently makes it clear he's upset about being fooled again. Jung Hae-sung hurriedly insists he never meant to deceive him. Then he points out that Do-hyun hid his illness too. So, let's call it even. Bold strategy. Do-hyun refuses to answer. He simply keeps turning the pages of his book while Jung Hae-sung waits in awkward silence. After a long sigh, Jung Hae-sung realizes words alone won't fix this. So he finally tells the whole truth. It's been an entire year since he last played the violin. The more he performed, the worse his condition became. At first he convinced himself it was only in his head. Eventually though, doctors ordered him to stop playing altogether. Then he admits something even more surprising. Those medical warnings were only part of the reason. Deep down, he'd simply found the perfect excuse to quit. He insists he wasn't trying to keep secrets from Do-hyun. He just never thought being a violinist actually mattered. Do-hyun asks a simple question. So, you don't like playing the violin? Jung Hae-sung honestly replies that he never picked up the instrument because he loved it. That's why walking away never filled him with regret. After thinking it through, Do-hyun summarizes everything. So you became famous doing something you didn't even enjoy. Jung Hee-sung nods. Adults really are built different. He simply laughs and says grown-ups can be complicated. But Do-hyun immediately disagrees. What he can't understand is how someone could claim not to love something they obviously do. The certainty in the boy's voice catches Jung Hee-sung by surprise. Do-hyun explains that he only has one thing he truly loves: acting. He admits it's strange because every time he performs, his health gets worse. Even knowing that, he still wants to keep acting more than anything else. That's why he believed Jung Hee-sung felt the same way. Because when he looked at him, he recognized the exact same passion he feels whenever he steps onto a stage. Looking him straight in the eyes, Do-hyun says with complete confidence that he can see how deeply Jung Hee-sung loves the violin. Deep down, the boy knows he's lying. And because of that, he decides to show him something. No lecture, just proof. Pressing both hands against his chest, Do-hyun quietly says he wants Jung Hee-sung to experience what it truly feels like to love something with all your heart. The narration shifts to Shakespeare's Macbeth, recounting the witch's prophecy that promised the throne. Driven by that prophecy, Macbeth and his wife choose ambition over morality, deciding they'll seize the crown no matter the cost. Turns out greed has terrible DLC. As the story reaches its darkest point, Do-hyun suddenly cries out in pain while crimson marks spread across his hands. Ignoring the pain, he slips into character and begins reciting Lady Macbeth's lines, desperately trying to wash away imaginary bloodstains. With his back turned, he acts as though he's standing before a sink, never breaking character for a second. The commitment level is genuinely terrifying. Then he slowly turns toward Jung Hee-sung. A chilling smile spreads across his face. His eyes no longer belong to a child. He's completely become Lady Macbeth. He reenacts the moment she is horrified by the sheer amount of blood covering the old king. Jung Hee-sung can only stare in stunned silence. Even knowing it's just a performance, he feels genuinely disturbed. For a brief moment, he wonders whether this is even the same quiet boy he met earlier, or if something else has taken over. Method acting entered the chat. Do-hyun pushes the performance even further. Now consumed by guilt and madness, he begs the terrifying visions to leave him alone. Wrapping his own hands around his throat, he screams for them to stop. His crimson eyes radiate pure despair. Reflected within them is Lady Macbeth herself, furiously condemning his fear for threatening everything they sacrificed. The performance grows so overwhelming that Do-hyun suddenly collapses from his chair. Jung Hee-sung instantly rushes over, calling his name. Still shaken by what he just witnessed, he grabs Do-hyun's shoulders and anxiously asks if he's alright. Inside his own mind, Jung Hee-sung admits something. Even though he knew it was only acting, he couldn't bear to watch until the end. Yeah, that's Oscar-level trauma. After helping Do-hyun, Jung Hee-sung sits on the bed and runs a hand through his hair. With a defeated sigh, he admits the boy has won. Do-hyun looks at him in confusion. Jung Hee-sung explains there's simply no resisting after seeing a performance like that. The kid's talent is too overwhelming. Standing up, he quietly walks across the room while Do-hyun watches without understanding. Then Jung Hee-sung bends down and picks up a violin case. He opens it. Inside rests a beautifully crafted violin. Plot twist. The loot box was worth opening. As he stares at the instrument, he quietly wonders how he ever managed to live without it for so long. Finally, he accepts what he's been denying. He really does love the violin. Facing the window, he gently rests it against his shoulder. The bow glides across the strings. Music fills the hospital room. Do-hyun stands completely mesmerized, unable to look away as every note surrounds him. He can feel every ounce of emotion Jung Hee-sung pours into the performance. Each sound carries longing, desperation, and the determination to give everything he has, even if it's only for this brief moment. Now Do-hyun knows he was right all along, about Jung Hee-sung, and about himself. Different artists, same disease. The narration reveals that, beneath the surface, both of them suffer from the same illness, and the same overwhelming devotion to their art. Without warning, a strange light appears between them. A mysterious voice declares that it has finally found the two unusual souls. Casually spawning mid-cutscene is wild. A glowing being materializes behind Do-hyun. It calmly tells them not to be afraid because, under normal circumstances, it can't interfere. Confused, Do-hyun asks what it means by normally. The radiant figure brushes the question aside and tells him not to worry about the details. Typical mysterious NPC behavior. The being decides introductions are in order. It explains that, just as humans use names, it will use one too. For now, you can call me the tuner. Do-hyun and Jung Hee-sung silently stare at the floating light while the tuner admits it isn't his real title, but it'll do. The entity casually reveals it can read Do-hyun's thoughts. It even jokes that Do-hyun can call it Blob if he wants, since every thought in his head reaches it anyway. Privacy settings, permanently disabled. Do-hyun suddenly remembers hearing the creature call both of them strange souls. Thinking it through, he realizes the only thing he and Jung Hee-sung truly share is the same illness. He asks what a strange soul actually is. The tuner confirms his deduction is correct. Praising Do-hyun for figuring it out so quickly, the glowing being asks both of them to stay calm because it only came to explain something important. Resting its hands on Do-hyun's shoulders, it asks whether they've never noticed that people reject them for no apparent reason. Then it clarifies something even worse. It's not only humans. Every living creature instinctively feels uncomfortable around them. Well, that's an absolutely cursed passive ability. Do-hyun clenches his fist, unable to understand how such a sweeping statement could possibly be true. The tuner explains that every living being is born with a complete soul. Except, on extremely rare occasions, something goes wrong. A mutation appears. Instead of becoming whole, a soul is born incomplete. The entity looks at both of them. They are those rare mistakes, those flawed souls. Everything finally starts making sense to Do-hyun. Now he understands why his parents never loved him, why every caregiver eventually abandoned him, why he waited his whole life for someone to hold his hand or simply say something kind, and why that wish only came true after meeting Yoon Hee-sung. It was all because he was born as a strange soul. The tuner explains that doctors will never discover the source of their illness, because the problem isn't in their bodies, it's in their souls. Their extraordinary talent, it says, is merely a side effect. An abnormal evolution created to keep incomplete souls alive. Whenever they fully immerse themselves in their gift, those fractured souls briefly approach completeness. Only for a moment, but in that instant, they become capable of creating something truly extraordinary. Something the world may never witness in quite the same way again. Do-hyun nervously asks what will happen to them. The tuner answers without hesitation. Under normal circumstances, both of them should have died long ago. Well, that's one way to start a conversation. Yoon Hee-sung cuts in, asking why the entity searched for them in the first place. The glowing being explains that they exist outside the natural order. Its role is to separate incomplete souls from their bodies before they disrupt the balance of existence. From a human perspective, that process is simply called death. Casual cosmic explanation. Nothing alarming at all, but this time things are different. A new possibility has appeared. Growing impatient, Yoon Hee-sung tells the tuner to stop speaking in riddles and get to the point. The entity finally reveals that there is another option. Instead of removing their souls, it can complete one of them. The tuner says it has the power to turn an incomplete soul into a whole one. There is, however, a single condition. Here comes the terms and conditions. With Do-hyun and Yoon Hee-sung shown side by side, the tuner reveals that only one of them can be saved. Yoon Hee-sung repeats the condition in disbelief. The entity quickly corrects him. Saving even one is already nothing short of a miracle. According to the tuner, they're unbelievably fortunate. The odds of two incomplete souls existing at the same time are already incredibly low. What's even rarer is that their souls are compatible enough to resonate. In all its existence, the tuner has never witnessed anything like it. Legendary drop rate. The process is simple in theory. One soul will be used to repair the fractures in the other. The two souls will merge into one. Neither of them will remain exactly the same person afterward. However, whichever soul takes the lead during the fusion will retain its consciousness. The tuner warns them not to waste time. Every time they use their extraordinary talents, their condition becomes even worse. Their gifts temporarily force their incomplete souls into an almost perfect state. The body pays the price. That powerful resonance between them allowed the tuner to find them, but it also consumed part of both of their souls. In other words, their beautiful duet literally burned away part of their remaining lives. Peak performance came with the worst subscription fee imaginable. Terrified, Do-hyun asks how much time they lost. The tuner reassures him that the boy is still relatively safe. The real problem is Yoon Hee-sung. His body won't survive beyond this year. That single resonance destroyed roughly 1 year of the life he still had left. Do-hyun's face goes completely pale. He instantly realizes what happened. Yoon Hee-sung had already given up playing the violin, but Do-hyun convinced him to perform again. And that decision pushed him even closer to death. The guilt hits like a truck. His voice shakes as he tries to apologize, blaming himself for everything. Before he can finish, Yoon Hee-sung firmly interrupts him. He tells Do-hyun to look at him. Playing the violin was his own decision. No one forced him. Even while facing death, he's still worried about comforting the kid. Certified big brother behavior. Determined, Do-hyun turns toward the tuner. He declares that this is all his fault. If someone has to be saved, it should be Yoon Hee-sung. The older man immediately scolds him. The tuner literally said Do-hyun isn't in immediate danger. He reminds the boy that there are people who care about him. Then Do-hyun reminds Yoon Hee-sung of something instead. He's a world-famous violinist. If complete strangers recognize him, then his life clearly matters to countless people. With a quiet but unwavering smile, Do-hyun says none of that changes his decision. He steps forward and hugs Yoon Hee-sung. The boy explains that Yoon Hee-sung has so much to lose. Unlike him, he has nothing. Those words stop Yoon Hee-sung cold. Do-hyun quietly says he's never truly accomplished anything in his life, so it's only right that Yoon Hee-sung survives. He still has a future waiting for him. Placing both hands on Yoon Hee-sung, Do-hyun gently says the only thing he wants is for his friend to keep living, because he's a good person. Silence. No comeback exists for that. Yoon Hee-sung is left speechless. He can't believe a child is capable of saying something so mature and so selfless. After gathering himself, he asks the tuner whether they must decide immediately. The entity replies that sooner is better, but they still have a little time. 1 week. That's all they're given. Relieved to have at least some breathing room, Yoon Hee-sung proposes making their decision after those 7 days. He asks the tuner to return then. The glowing being agrees. Calling itself generous, it grants the request before disappearing in a flash of light. Quest accepted. Timer started. Once the light fades, Yoon Hee-sung kneels in front of Do-hyun. Neither of them speaks. They're both trying to process everything they just heard. Do-hyun finally breaks the silence, thinking about the impossible choice waiting for them. Jung Hae-sung immediately cuts him off. There's absolutely no chance he'll accept the boy sacrificing himself. Do-hyun suggests spending the week searching for another solution. Maybe there's a loophole. Maybe the tuner left something out. Back in his room, Do-hyun can't stop wondering whether another answer truly exists. And if there isn't, what will they do? The next day, Jung Hae-sung suddenly wraps his arms around Do-hyun from behind. He tells him that worrying non-stop won't change anything. So instead of wasting the week in fear, they should spend it making memories together. Honestly, that's probably the healthiest decision anyone's made so far. Wanting to make the most of the time they have left, Jung Hae-sung invites Do-hyun somewhere special. He asks a simple question. Have you ever seen a live stage play? The confused boy quietly shakes his head. Soon afterward, the two leave the hospital wearing ordinary clothes. As they walk through the city, Do-hyun stares at everything around him in amazement. Every street feels brand new, like he's unlocking the outside world for the first time. They eventually arrive in front of an enormous theater. The sheer size of the building leaves Do-hyun speechless. Even Jung Hae-sung looks impressed. After buying their tickets with his violin case slung over his shoulder, he notices Do-hyun watching him with admiration. Once they're seated inside, the boy excitedly looks around, taking in every detail of this completely unfamiliar world. The theater lights fade, silence settles over the audience. Then the curtain rises, and the actors begin the play. Do-hyun can't look away. His eyes sparkle as he watches every scene unfold before him. This is the first time he's ever seen actors perform live, and he's completely captivated. Every expression, every change in their voices, even the sound of their breathing feels real. No pause button, no second take. With one hand over his chest, Do-hyun feels every emotion flowing from the stage. For the first time, he truly understands what acting really is. Beside him, Jung Hae-sung quietly watches the boy instead of the performance. Seeing Do-hyun so completely absorbed makes him smile. Mission accomplished. Later, beneath the warm colors of the evening sky outside the theater, Jung Hae-sung feels genuinely happy that he brought him here. After the show ends, the two stroll down the sidewalk while Do-hyun excitedly talks about everything he just witnessed. They stop at a street food stand. Holding up 2 fingers, Jung Hae-sung orders a pair of skewers to go. Best post-theater combo, emotional damage and grilled meat. As they make their way back toward the hospital, Do-hyun occasionally glances at his friend with a thoughtful expression. That night, he quietly reflects on how the happiest moments always seem to end the fastest. Returning through the park, Do-hyun suddenly recognizes a familiar bench. It was right here that they first met. The place where Jung Hae-sung collapsed and where their friendship began. Jung Hae-sung notices him staring and asks if he'd like to sit down for a while. Do-hyun nods. The two settle onto the bench while Jung Hae-sung places his violin case beside him. A quiet anticipation fills the air. Do-hyun looks over, slightly puzzled. Without saying another word, Jung Hae-sung opens the case and gently lifts out his violin. The boy blinks in surprise. Smiling softly, Jung Hae-sung admits he abandoned the instrument for far too long. But he promises he won't make that mistake again. Character development unlocked. Then, with playful confidence, he introduces himself once more. Violinist Jung Hae-sung, and today's performance is just for you. Do-hyun immediately breaks into loud applause, grinning from ear to ear. Jung Hae-sung raises the bow. The first note rings out. Beautiful music pours through the park, wrapping the entire area in its melody. Eyes closed, he loses himself completely in the performance. At that moment, it almost feels as though he isn't playing the music. He is the music. The piece begins gently before swelling into a breathtaking finale filled with freedom and emotion. Do-hyun sits frozen. All he can do is stare in complete admiration. When the last note fades away, Jung Hae-sung lowers the violin and exhales deeply. He's visibly exhausted, but happier than he's been in a long time. His slightly flushed face says everything. That performance meant something special. Without either of them noticing, a crowd has quietly gathered around the bench. The applause erupts. Free concert acquired. Jung Hae-sung looks around in surprise, wondering when so many people showed up. Meanwhile, Do-hyun watches him with shining eyes, convinced everything about this moment is incredible. Just as the boy opens his mouth to praise him, Jung Hae-sung suddenly grabs his wrist. Completely confused, Do-hyun is pulled away before he can finish speaking. Jung Hae-sung laughs and says they're in trouble if someone recognizes him. Celebrity problems. The two immediately sprint away. Before long, they're standing in front of the hospital again. Both are breathing heavily. Jung Hae-sung still has the violin case in one hand, and Do-hyun's hand in the other. For a brief moment, they simply look at each other while catching their breath. Then they both burst into laughter. No words, just pure happiness. Back in the present, Jung Hae-sung sits quietly on his hospital bed. He reflects that wonderful moments always disappear far too quickly. Just like that perfect day, the deadline for their decision has finally arrived. Later, inside Do-hyun's room, Jung Hae-sung places the violin case on the boy's bed. It's yours. Do-hyun looks at him in complete surprise and asks why. Jung Hae-sung simply replies that he wanted to give it to him. Sometimes that's all the reason you need. Opening the case, Do-hyun discovers the violin inside. Jung Hae-sung explains that it was custom-made. The gift instantly becomes even more meaningful. He quietly admits that spending time with Do-hyun makes him forget the cruel reality they're living in. Holding the violin close, Do-hyun smiles. Even knowing he may not have much time left, he still finds himself hoping for tomorrow. A brief flashback crosses his mind. The days he spent together with his friends still feel almost unreal. Everything turned out to be far more fun than he ever imagined. Most importantly, he discovered that living is actually wonderful. Returning to the present, Do-hyun says there's something he has to tell Jung Hee-sung before it's too late. Curious, Jung Hee-sung waits for him to continue. Resting one hand on the violin case, Do-hyun quietly makes an unexpected request. Looking directly into his friend's eyes, he says that if the tuner refuses to accept his soul, then he wants to leave this world together with him. The room falls completely silent. Yeah, that's not something you prepare for. After a long pause, Do-hyun nervously asks whether those words made him angry. Jung Hee-sung, still processing everything, simply nods in agreement. Inside, however, he's overwhelmed. Not long ago, this boy saw no value in living. Now he's talking about how beautiful life is and dreaming about the future. With a peaceful smile, Jung Hee-sung folds his arms. For him, hearing those words alone is enough. Tears begin gathering in Do-hyun's eyes as he quietly thanks his friend for accepting his wish. Suddenly, his eyelids grow unbearably heavy. Confused, he wonders why he's becoming so sleepy. Before he can react, his body gives out. He collapses forward. Jung Hee-sung catches him in his arms before he hits the floor. Instant panic mode. Calling Do-hyun's name over and over, Jung Hee-sung desperately tries to wake him. Just then, a brilliant multicolored light floods in through the window. The musician turns toward it. A familiar mysterious voice calmly asks whether he's wondering why the boy suddenly fell asleep. It explains that keeping Do-hyun awake would have made things much more complicated. Jung Hee-sung gently lowers the unconscious Do-hyun onto the bed before quietly thanking the glowing being floating nearby. The little sphere of light, now calling itself Blob, asks one final question. Is he absolutely certain? No last-minute regrets? No confirmation screen after this. Jung Hee-sung doesn't answer with words. His unwavering expression says everything. His decision was made long ago. The story then jumps back 1 week earlier, to the conversation that determined both of their fates. Late that night, Jung Hee-sung sat alone in his hospital room, staring into the darkness beyond the window. He softly called out for Blob, wondering if the strange being was still listening. The glowing light immediately appeared outside the glass. Jung Hee-sung told it he had one final favor to ask. Blob grumbles that it isn't some pet that can be summoned whenever someone feels like it. Even so, it decides to hear him out. Peak, I'm not helping, but I'm helping energy. Without the slightest hesitation, Jung Hee-sung makes his request. Save Do-hyun. Blob sighs, remarking that neither of them seems to value their own lives very much. Jung Hee-sung calmly disagrees. He treasures his life, more than ever. Playing the violin again reminded him of that. Even now, he can still feel the warmth of that moment. He remembers the day Blob told him there was a chance he could survive. For the first time in a long while, he imagined a future where he could see his younger brother again, a future where he genuinely wanted to keep living. But then he remembers Do-hyun's words. The boy believed he had nothing to lose. Jung Hee-sung refuses to accept that. No kid deserves to reach the end of life believing that. His wish is simple. He wants Do-hyun to experience so many wonderful things that someday he'll actually regret having to leave this world. That's why he made his choice. He wants the boy to have a real chance at living. 28 years feels like enough, he says. Do-hyun barely had the opportunity to start. Meanwhile, that kid has probably never even eaten fried chicken. Honestly, that's the real tragedy here. The hospital is the only world Do-hyun has ever known. Jung Hee-sung understands loneliness, but the boy deserves something completely different. Smiling with quiet determination, he makes it clear nothing will change his mind. Allowing Do-hyun's life to end here simply isn't something he can accept. Seeing that resolve, Blob asks for the man's name. My name is Jung Hee-sung. He repeats it clearly, like he's signing an invisible contract. Blob accepts his decision. Then it offers one final gift. It promises to freeze the flow of time within Jung Hee-sung's soul, allowing him to enjoy the little life he has left. Back in the present, Jung Hee-sung thanks Blob for granting that wish. Because of it, he was able to play the violin with his whole heart one last time. Blob quietly asks whether he's truly satisfied. If he wants, there's still time to reverse everything. Do-hyun's life could become the price for saving his own. Last chance before checkout. The entity reminds him that Do-hyun was willing to make the exact same sacrifice. It even warns that the boy may end up hating him after learning the truth. Jung Hee-sung smiles sadly. He'd hate that. But adults have to carry burdens they don't want. Blob then asks whether it can wait a few more hours before taking his soul. Curious, Jung Hee-sung asks why. The entity assumes he wants more time. Instead, Jung Hee-sung says it's for Do-hyun. He doesn't want the boy waking up beside his lifeless body. That memory would haunt him forever. He wants Do-hyun to return to his own room, fall asleep peacefully, and wake up believing it's just another ordinary morning. Blob quietly wonders if all this compassion comes from the unusual compatibility between their souls. It confirms they're almost perfectly matched. Jung Hee-sung's soul, it says, resembles a brilliant sunset. Do-hyun's feels like the cold ocean, or an endless sky. Together, they're an impossibly rare combination. That's why their souls were capable of resonating and merging in the first place. Lore drop acquired. With a faint smile, Young Hee-sung admits he originally thought meeting Do-hyun was nothing more than coincidence. Now, looking at the sleeping boy, he no longer believes that. Their encounter feels like destiny. Blob teases him for getting sentimental. Young Hee-sung quietly laughs. Maybe that's what happens when someone knows their time is almost over. The glowing being reflects on those words. Perhaps he's right. Sometimes the world creates events that simply can't be explained. Moments where everything falls perfectly into place. Humans call that destiny. Jung Hee-sung quietly comments that Blob is kinder than it pretends to be. Embarrassed, the little light mutters that there's no reason to act cruel towards someone so pitiful. Sundara Cosmic Orb confirmed. Jung Hee-sung then asks Blob for one last favor. Whatever Do-hyun says after waking up, please go along with it. Blob complains that now it has to act too. Even so, it agrees. Following the plan, Blob floats over to the sleeping boy. Little human, it's time to wake up. Do-hyun opens his eyes in confusion, unable to remember why he suddenly fell asleep. Blob casually tells him he was probably just exhausted. Immediately, Do-hyun turns toward Jung Hee-sung. Did he get the chance to discuss their plan? Lowering his eyes, Jung Hee-sung quietly says he never got around to it. A flawless performance. Without suspecting anything, Do-hyun faces Blob directly. He asks the question that's been haunting him. Is there any possible way for both of them to survive? Blob answers immediately. No. No loopholes. No hidden ending. No secret DLC. Only one of them can live. If neither chooses, both souls will disappear together. After hearing that, Do-hyun calmly makes his decision. He refuses to survive alone. If the only options are sacrificing one friend or losing both, he chooses to spend whatever time remains together until the very end. He politely refuses Blob's offer. His choice is final. Blob introduces itself as an impartial observer. If its help isn't accepted, it has no right to interfere. It only hopes they won't regret their decision. With that, the glowing light fades from the window and disappears. Silence fills the hospital room once more. After a long pause, Jung Hee-sung finally speaks. He asks Do-hyun if he remembers something Blob told him during their previous conversation. Then he prepares to reveal an important truth about the boy's condition, something Do-hyun still doesn't know. He quietly reveals that the entity had already told him the truth. He only had about a month left, maybe even just 3 weeks. Do-hyun freezes, finally realizing how little time his friend has left, and reaches out to touch him without saying a word. Talk about a countdown nobody wanted. Jung Hee-sung apologizes, but the confused boy can't understand what he's apologizing for. The older man admits he never wanted to become the kind of big brother who only leaves pain behind. Yet that's exactly what he fears he's become. He believes Do-hyun will end up so lonely and heartbroken that he'll eventually want to give up on life. Do-hyun immediately shouts that he could never hate him, asking how he could possibly believe something like that. Bro skipped denial and went straight to yelling. A bittersweet smile crosses Jung Hee-sung's face as he gently asks Do-hyun not to say things like that. Holding the boy's hand tightly, he says there's one promise he absolutely needs. He asks Do-hyun to keep living until the very end, before ever trying to meet him again beyond this world. Simply surviving isn't enough. He wants the boy to fight for a happy life. Unable to stop crying, Do-hyun says he can't do it because life without him feels impossible. Yeah, that one hurts. Jung Hee-sung raises his pinky and asks him to seal the promise. Completely devastated, Do-hyun hooks his finger with his friends and finally agrees to try. After saying goodbye, the boy reaches the doorway but hesitates before leaving. Already lying in bed, Jung Hee-sung quietly asks if they'll see each other again tomorrow. Do-hyun turns back with a bright grin and jokes, "What, were you planning to get rid of me already?" Even at the saddest moments, this duo sneaks in one last joke. The musician gets up, walks to the door, and calls Do-hyun's name one final time that night. As the boy heads back to his room, Jung Hee-sung wishes him sweet dreams and a peaceful night. Deep down, he prays every remaining day of Do-hyun's future will be filled with happiness. The story then jumps to Jung Hee-sung lying unconscious in a hospital bed, breathing through an oxygen mask. Years pass, and a teenage Do-hyun remembers that broken promise through tears, calling his friend a liar. The flashback shifts to Jung Hee-sung's childhood, revealing a life shaped by rejection inside an orphanage. His story began the day he was abandoned as an infant in a public restroom. Well, the universe really started him on nightmare difficulty. The orphanage echoed with insults as the other children relentlessly bullied him, telling him to disappear forever. Lying helplessly on the ground, he listened as they mocked him for always coming back after being adopted. Young Jung Hee-sung couldn't understand it either. Families would warmly welcome him into their homes, only to abandon him again before long, without explanation. Eventually he accepted what seemed obvious, that there simply wasn't a place for him anywhere. Life became pure survival, and he clawed through it fueled by nothing but stubborn resentment. One day, another couple arrived hoping to adopt him, but he greeted them with suspicion instead of hope. Fool me once. During their meeting, the young boy flatly refused to leave with them. He'd already learned how every adoption ended, and he refused to repeat the same heartbreak. He begged them to stop pretending because he couldn't endure another cycle of false hope. The couple refused to give up. The woman even offered him a giant teddy bear, hoping to break the ice. To his surprise, they kept returning with candy, stuffed animals, nice clothes, and endless kindness until he slowly grew accustomed to it. Even the sharpest walls crack eventually. Bit by bit, the lonely child lowered the defenses he'd built around his heart. Hope, which he'd buried long ago, quietly began growing again. Walking hand in hand with them, he dared to believe that maybe this family would finally be different. Narrator, the universe immediately took that personally. One evening, he wandered through the house carrying a small present he'd carefully prepared for his adoptive parents. Since they'd seemed exhausted lately, he wanted to cheer them up. As he neared their bedroom, he overheard his adoptive mother saying she wanted to send him away. He stood there in shock as she confessed she couldn't understand why she hated him despite desperately trying to love him. His adoptive father tried calming her down, but she insisted merely sharing a room with him made her miserable. Instead, he suggested pretending the boy didn't exist while continuing to support him financially so other people wouldn't judge them. Outside the bedroom, Jung Hae-sung remained frozen, clutching the gift as every word shattered him. Silently, he carried the present to the nearest trash can and threw it away. No boss fight, just emotional damage. His face went completely blank as the truth settled in. History had repeated itself once again. From that moment on, something inside him turned cold. If people would never truly accept him, then survival would have to come first. He realized good grades alone would never secure his future. He needed something far more valuable. Watching his adoptive mother closely, he searched for a weakness he could use. Eventually, he discovered her greatest regret. She had always dreamed of becoming a violinist. Unfortunately, she was forced to abandon that dream after realizing she lacked the talent to make it professionally. At that moment, Jung Hae-sung understood she wasn't special, just another person carrying broken dreams. And that's when the young boy found the perfect way to earn her approval. He would use music as his weapon. His natural gift, paired with relentless practice, left his adoptive mother speechless. Before long, newspapers were calling him the next violin prodigy. Bro speedran the gifted kid achievement. The years passed, and the talented child grew into a celebrated young violinist with a thriving career. He never abandoned the instrument because, in his mind, it was the only reason he was still alive, even while audiences showered him with applause. Yet every standing ovation felt strangely hollow. Turns out surviving and living aren't the same thing. Everything changed the day he was admitted to a major university hospital. After examining him, the doctor wore a grave expression and informed him he needed to stay. Soon afterward, he received the diagnosis of a rare disease that would rewrite the rest of his life. Sitting alone in his hospital room, he struggled to accept that even the violin had to be taken away. Being forgotten by people didn't bother him anymore. He'd survived worse. But losing the violin, that pain hit differently. Running his fingers across the case, he wondered when that simple instrument had become the most important thing in his world. Then his eyes drifted toward the neighboring room, and he realized there was no reason to hesitate anymore. After loosening the violin strings, he walked next door to meet the lonely little boy. That single decision became the beginning of the brightest chapter either of them would ever experience. When Jung Hae-sung finally passed away, he rested peacefully in his hospital bed. His last thought was simple. It had been a good ending. Not perfect, but good enough. Sometime later, Do-hyun's doctor stared at the latest test results in complete disbelief. There was only one explanation left. A miracle. Every new examination showed steady improvement, almost as if magic itself had rewritten reality. Even stranger, the doctor noticed something else. The fear and discomfort he had always felt around Do-hyun had disappeared completely. Now the boy looked gentle and peaceful, as though the darkness surrounding him had simply vanished. The doctor explained that Do-hyun was essentially cured and would recover better at home than inside the hospital. Lowering his eyes, Do-hyun quietly asked if that meant he was being discharged. The doctor confirmed there was no medical reason to keep him hospitalized. The body wasn't the problem anymore, his heart was. Most days the boy either slept for hours or silently stared through the window. Because of that, the doctor decided it was finally time to contact Do-hyun's parents. He offered the boy the chance to call them himself. Do-hyun simply asked the doctor to do it instead. Yeah, that answer said everything. Understanding exactly what that silence meant, the doctor agreed and stepped away to make the call. The scene cuts outside the hospital. Elsewhere in the city, an elegant couple steps out of a taxi, both wearing worried expressions. The husband gently places a reassuring hand on his wife's shoulder as they continue walking. The setting shifts to a corporate office, revealing the business-oriented life Do-hyun's parents have been living. Then Do-hyun's mother answers her phone. She's stunned when the doctor tells her son is ready to leave the hospital. Wait, good news? In this story? Barely able to process what she heard, she quietly repeats the word discharged. The doctor explains that after a full month of observation, they're convinced the recovery is genuine, not temporary. He recalls the 8 long years of struggle before calling the boy's recovery nothing short of miraculous. Mrs. Seo becomes overwhelmed with emotion. Her voice trembling, she asks if her son is truly healthy now. The doctor says yes, but immediately adds there's another concern. Physically, Do-hyun is recovering. Mentally, he's in terrible condition. He explains that losing his closest friend left the boy emotionally shattered, and now he spends nearly half the day asleep. More than medicine, he says, Do-hyun needs something only his family can provide. Love, comfort, actually being there. On the other end of the call, Mrs. Seo hesitantly asks whether her son ever asked about them. The doctor's answer is no. She quietly clenches her hand, crushed by the emotional distance between them. After composing herself, she ends the call, saying she'll coordinate the discharge plans with her husband. A flashback follows. Do-hyun's father asks whether she'll really be alright staying alone in the United States. Mrs. Seo answers without hesitation. The decision has already been made. Their 9-year-old son can no longer face his regular treatments alone in a foreign country. For the first time, she realizes she'll actually be living with her own child. And strangely enough, she's nervous. A gentle light fills the room, signaling the beginning of a completely new chapter for the family. Packed and ready to leave, Do-hyun quietly stares at the now empty hospital room. It still doesn't feel real that he's finally going home. A knock breaks the silence. In a soft voice, he tells whoever it is to come in. The door slowly swings open, revealing the people waiting outside to take him home. His parents stand in the hallway. Nobody speaks. Sometimes silence is louder than dialogue. Do-hyun looks at them with calm but sorrowful eyes, his violin case resting on his back. His parents freeze, overwhelmed by guilt, unsure of what words could possibly bridge the distance between them. The camera lingers on the boy's eyes, revealing a maturity far beyond someone his age. Across from him, his mother's eyes overflow with tears she'd held back for years. Finally unable to stand any longer, Mrs. Seo collapses to her knees as her husband rushes to support her. Do-hyun simply watches. In that heartbreaking moment, she asks herself what she'd been doing all these years. Only now does she truly realize the child standing before her is her one and only son. The father tries to ease the tension by asking if everything is packed. Do-hyun quietly says yes, while his mother remains collapsed on the floor. Turning toward her, he calmly says, "I'm sorry." Meanwhile, everyone's emotional damage meter just hit max. Mrs. Seo bursts into tears, covering her face as she repeatedly insists that she should be the one apologizing. She keeps sobbing, saying over and over how sorry she is, but Do-hyun simply watches without much expression. He gently stops her and says she's mistaken. According to him, the real problem was himself. He explains that the distance between them was inevitable because of the condition of his soul, and nothing they could have done would have changed that. Way too much emotional maturity for someone who still qualifies for kids' meals. With unsettling composure, he tells her everything is okay. His mother freezes, unable to understand how her son can react so calmly. Still crying, she asks how he can possibly say everything is fine. After everything they put him through, why isn't he angry? Do-hyun looks genuinely puzzled. Should I be? He asks. He cannot understand why she looks so hurt. His thoughts drift to Haesung and the time they spent together on the park bench. He also remembers the dramatic performance his friend put on just for him that day. Oscar-worthy commitment, honestly. In his mind, he speaks to his friend, telling him he's finally leaving the hospital. Holding the violin case in the car, he feels a faint warmth. He recognizes it as Haesung's feelings. It's as though his friend is quietly telling him that everything will be alright, and that he deserves happiness. His mother pulls him back to reality by asking what's inside the case. From the driver's seat, his father glances through the rearview mirror and wonders if his son knows how to play the violin. Do-hyun hugs the case tighter and somehow feels certain that he does. His confidence spawned out of absolutely nowhere. A second later, he rejects the thought. That ability belonged to Haesung's life, not his own. Breaking the silence, his mother tells him she has already found them a house in the United States near the ocean. She adds that he'll also be starting elementary school there. The news catches him completely off guard. Mrs. Seo smiles and explains that now he's finally out of the hospital. Going to school is the natural next step. She also mentions that his hospital classes count for credit, so he'll begin directly in 2nd grade. As the car drives farther away, Do-hyun looks back one last time. Only then does the reality finally sink in. No loading screen. This is the new save file. When they arrive, he's stunned by the size of their new home. His mother says it's more than spacious enough for all of them. Inside, his father explains that he only bought the essential furniture and suggests shopping for everything else tomorrow. Do-hyun carries the violin case upstairs toward his new bedroom, while his parents quietly watch from the doorway. Before going inside, he turns around and asks if they've already eaten dinner. His father says they have, and asks if his son needs anything. Do-hyun simply replies that he's fine. His mother suggests he get some rest while they finish unpacking. He quietly agrees. Then, with obvious hesitation, Mrs. Seo asks if she can wake him up the following morning. Just a mom asking permission to be a mom. He stares at her for a moment, surprised that such a simple request seems so important to her. She waits nervously, hands clasped together, hoping he'll say yes. Do-hyun realizes they'll be living together from now on. He'll have to get used to that, so he agrees. Relief instantly washes over his mother's face as she wishes him good night and promises to wake him in the morning. Left alone, Do-hyun stands silently in the middle of his unfamiliar bedroom. He reflects on how completely his life has changed. A new country, a new house, a new school. Looking through the window, everything outside feels unfamiliar. It's like someone dropped him into a completely different world. He remembers this is the new life Haesung left behind for him. Even so, he still has no idea what he's supposed to do with it. The next morning, sunlight shines over the family's large modern home. Mrs. Seo stops outside her son's room and takes a deep breath before opening the door. Smiling gently, she quietly calls out to wake him. Instead, she finds Do-hyun already sitting on the bed, fully dressed and completely ready. Early bird unlocked the achievement before breakfast. Feeling slightly embarrassed, she tells him they'll eat first and then go shopping, asking if that sounds okay. As always, he calmly answers yes. The family heads to a huge shopping mall packed with stores and crowds of people. They begin in a kitchenware shop. His parents fumble through the shopping trip, while Do-hyun silently watches them. The poor guy is basically observing parenting like it's a nature documentary. Unsure how to interact with them, he simply follows along. Eventually they arrive at an enormous bookstore called Taylor's Book. His mother asks if he'd like to browse. His father reminds her they still have plenty left to buy. She ignores that suggestion without hesitation. Priority update, books have entered the chat. Mrs. Seo hands all the shopping bags to her husband and invites Do-hyun to explore the bookstore with her. The endless shelves leave him speechless. He thought he'd already read countless books, but this place makes the hospital library look tiny. While browsing, he finds a science fiction novel that immediately catches his attention. A little farther down another aisle, he notices a special display advertising the book of the month. His face lights up with excitement as he wonders what it's about. Then, before he can get a closer look, someone suddenly bumps into him from behind. The collision sends every book in Do-hyun's hands flying across the bookstore floor. Caught off guard, he quickly kneels to gather the scattered books. A voice suddenly calls out to him. Looking up in confusion, he finds another boy standing over him. The older kid frowns and demands, "Why didn't you apologize?" Starting strong with the customer service attitude. Still sitting on the floor, Do-hyun quietly hugs the books to his chest without saying a word. Then he suddenly freezes, stunned by the boy's confrontational tone. He hurriedly stands and blurts out an awkward apology. That unexpected reaction catches the other boy off guard. Keeping a straight face, the kid in the green jacket asks whether Do-hyun got hurt. Plot twist, the bully accidentally unlocked basic human decency. Clutching the books, Do-hyun looks back with an innocent, almost timid expression. The older boy silently wonders what is wrong with this strange kid. In his mind, he admits he deliberately bumped into Do-hyun, hoping to make him cry. Professional hater behavior. What irritates him most is Do-hyun's unusually special aura. Then he notices the expensive-looking clothes. Even the simplest outfit screams money. He immediately concludes they come from completely different worlds. No point pretending they'd ever have anything in common. With that, the boy mutters for Do-hyun to forget about it and walks away. Do-hyun is left standing there, thoroughly confused. Right then, his mother rushes over while calling his name, clearly worried. Mrs. Seo reaches him with visible relief and asks if he found the books he wanted. She silently admits she panicked the moment she saw what happened. She knows she shouldn't hover over him, but parental instincts just activated at full power. Do-hyun says he picked out a few books. Then, somewhat hesitantly, he asks if he should put some back. His mother immediately says there aren't nearly enough. She reminds him the study room at home is completely empty and needs shelves full of books. The little boy lights up in surprise. "So, I can really fill them?" His reaction melts her heart. With sparkling eyes, he asks if he can grab even more books. She smiles and suggests they eat lunch first. Sometime later, the family enjoys a meal together at a restaurant. During lunch, Mrs. Seo confirms with her husband that his flight leaves at 6 o'clock. He explains that, although he'd love to stay longer, work obligations require him to return to Korea. Adult responsibilities, the final boss. Concerned, Do-hyun asks whether his mother will be alright living there alone. She reassures him by explaining how their new family arrangement will work. Smiling confidently, Mrs. Seo says remaining in the United States is exactly what she wants. She tells him not to worry about her. Do-hyun quietly accepts her answer. Later, the family arrives at the airport to say goodbye. They exchange final reminders to stay healthy and safe. His father eventually turns toward the boarding gate. Before disappearing, he looks back one last time. He calls out Do-hyun's name. The boy silently meets his father's gaze. With a warm smile, his father leaves him with one final request. Stay healthy. Simple words. Maximum emotional damage. Soon the airplane lifts into the colorful sky, carrying him back to Korea. Do-hyun watches until it disappears into the distance. Back home, he collapses onto his bed, completely worn out. He admits it's been ages since he'd experienced such a busy day. His thoughts drift to Hae-sung. Ever since his friend left, every day has felt incredibly long. He wonders whether he'll be able to keep the promise he made. No pressure, just carrying someone else's final wish. His eyes fall on his new school supplies. Tomorrow will be his very first day at a new elementary school. A heavy weight settles over him. Hae-sung sacrificed his own soul so Do-hyun could keep living. Closing his eyes, he questions whether he truly deserves the life he was given. The following morning, bright sunshine lights up the entrance of his new school. Inside the classroom, the teacher greets everyone with a cheerful smile. She announces that a new student will be joining them. The class enthusiastically agrees to give him a warm welcome. The teacher happily invites him inside. Do-hyun steps into the classroom. As he walks forward, he quietly wonders if he'll make it through his first day. First day anxiety has entered the lobby. A blonde girl in the front row immediately watches him with obvious curiosity. The teacher leads him to the front and asks him to introduce himself. Surrounded by dozens of staring faces, Do-hyun becomes visibly nervous. He has no idea what he's supposed to say. At the hospital, people usually kept their distance. Being everyone's center of attention is completely new. respawned into the extrovert tutorial against his will. After gathering his courage, he politely introduces himself as Do-hyun. He explains that he recently moved there and says he's pleased to meet everyone. His speech is so formal that the teacher can't hide her surprise. Bro delivered a corporate onboarding presentation. She points him toward an empty desk at the back of the classroom. The moment he sits down, curious classmates swarm around him. A girl introduces herself as Jin Lasia. She then points at the boy sitting beside Do-hyun and says his name is Nicholas Gabby. Feeling overwhelmed by everyone's attention, Do-hyun can only manage an awkward, "Hi." Nicholas smiles and says everyone calls him Nikki. He invites Do-hyun to use the nickname too. On the outside, Nikki seems perfectly friendly. Inside though, he's already getting irritated. The girls gathered around the new kid faster than an anime protagonist with hidden powers. One girl mentions she's visited Do-hyun's neighborhood before. She says the houses there have huge backyards and even swimming pools. Curious, she asks whether Do-hyun's house has one too. He casually answers yes. Nikki is visibly stunned. Jin Lasia immediately lights up and points out that Nikki absolutely loves swimming, grinning at her friend. Nikki's face turns bright red as he awkwardly suggests they should hang out at Do-hyun's house and go swimming someday. Do-hyun simply stares at him, unsure how he's supposed to respond to such an unexpected invitation. After a long pause, all he says is, "I see." Critical hit. Social interaction has been defeated. Nikki stands there speechless. He can't believe that was the only response he got. To him, the new kid comes across as cold and completely unapproachable. Fine then, mission failed successfully. Silently annoyed, Nikki decides he'll never bother trying to befriend the arrogant transfer student again. The school day passes quickly. After class, Jin Lasia happily drags Do-hyun over to meet the rest of her friends. The group welcomes him with smiles and obvious curiosity. Trying to fit in, he forces a small smile despite feeling completely out of place. Bro's social battery was already flashing red. As he packs up to leave, he reflects on the day. The classes themselves weren't nearly as exciting as he'd expected. Most of the lessons covered things he already knew. What surprises him far more is how openly everyone wants to befriend him. Jin Lasia calls him over so they can all leave together. He looks at her and unconsciously smiles back. Character development just snuck in without permission. Walking beside his new classmates, he wonders what he's supposed to do with these unfamiliar emotions. Can he really accept this kindness? As they head toward the exit, everyone chats about how they're getting home. Their daily routines couldn't be more different. Jin complains that he won't be riding the bus with Nikki today. Meanwhile, Do-hyun quietly thinks he wouldn't want to be on that bus anyway. Fair enough, buddy. Outside the school gates, he spots his mother patiently waiting beside the car. He tells his friends it's time for him to go. Jin says it's unfortunate but understands. They exchange cheerful goodbyes and promise to see each other again tomorrow. Do-hyun waves as he leaves. Then Nikki's love of swimming suddenly comes back to mind. He looks down at his own hand. Should he have invited them over? That thought alone makes him stop walking. He's startled by himself. Why would he even care about something like that? The friendly smiles, the warm voices. Why do those simple things matter so much? His mind drifts back to the life he once lived. A life filled with contempt and hatred simply because he was born with a flawed soul. Covering his face with both hands, he wonders what purpose such a painful existence ever had. No easy answer unlocked. Back at his new home, that heavy mood refuses to leave him. Night falls. His mother quietly walks to his bedroom and gently knocks. Mrs. Seo senses something is deeply wrong. Even so, she hesitates before opening the door. She regrets not asking him about school earlier. No use regretting it now. Determined to fix that mistake, she steps inside. There she finds Do-hyun sitting on the bed, silently clutching the violin case with an empty, distant stare. He's completely lost in his grief, holding on to the only thing connecting him to Haesung. Watching from the doorway, his mother is left speechless. She realizes only 10 steps separate them. Physically, they're incredibly close. Emotionally, it feels like an entire world stands between them. Distance measured in feelings instead of meters. Summoning every bit of courage she has, Mrs. Seo softly calls his name. Then she suddenly rushes over and wraps him in a tight embrace. The unexpected hug catches Do-hyun completely off guard. Her face is filled with equal parts desperation and determination. It looks as though she wants to shield him from every ounce of pain he's carrying. Startled, Do-hyun turns toward her. "How long were you standing there?" He hates the thought of her seeing those memories, and he hopes she hadn't noticed his condition. Still holding the violin case, he quietly asks why she came to his room. His mother takes a slow breath before speaking with a gentle smile. She asks whether he doesn't feel trapped spending all his time alone in that dark room. Instead of bringing up his sadness directly, she suggests they go for a walk. Do-hyun blinks in surprise. She even offers to visit the beach together. Smooth topic change. Mom rolled a natural 20 on emotional support. Even though the ocean is nearby, he politely refuses. Instead, he says he'd rather walk around the neighborhood by himself. He asks if that's all right. His mother agrees, asking only that he not stay out too late. Before letting him leave, she gives him every safety warning imaginable. Don't follow strangers. Call the police if anything happens. The full deluxe parent package. With the violin case in hand, Do-hyun leaves the house. He plans to stay out just long enough so his mother won't worry. It doesn't take long before he's struggling to catch his breath. His legs begin to itch. Maybe it's because he spent so much time confined to the hospital. He notices a gazebo in a nearby park and decides to rest there for a while. Slowly, he makes his way across the plaza with the heavy violin case. Suddenly, the wind carries a loose sheet of paper straight to his feet. Loot drop acquired. Curious, he picks it up and starts reading. His eyes widen almost immediately. This isn't just a random piece of paper. They're pages from a movie or stage script. While he's distracted, someone nearby suddenly shouts in frustration. Looking toward the gazebo, he spots a blonde man angrily crumpling another page. Do-hyun wonders if the script belongs to him. The man grips a pen, desperately trying to write, but no ideas come. Finally, he buries his face in one hand and lets out a cry of pure frustration. Completely crushed by writer's block, the blonde man groans that no matter how many times he rewrites the script, it never feels good enough. He even starts regretting quitting his stable job just to chase a movie dream. Career change speedrun, emotional damage edition. Out of ideas, he slumps face first onto the wooden table, utterly drained. A faint movement catches his eye. Curious, he turns toward it. Standing there is Do-hyun, quietly holding a few pages. The writer wonders when part of his script ended up on the ground. He studies the mysterious kid with a serious expression, trying to figure out what he's doing. Then another thought pops into his head. The boy's appearance is striking enough that he'd probably look great on camera. Bro switched from screenwriter to casting director in 3 seconds. His fantasy ends the moment he recognizes the pages in Do-hyun's hands. Do-hyun starts to speak. Before he can, the writer cuts him off, internally panicking because he'd never shown that script to anyone before. Embarrassed, he turns his face away while the boy continues reading. He also finds it strange that a child seems so invested in a story clearly written for adults. Eventually, Do-hyun reaches the final page. Seeing the ending marked by the last word, he quietly lets out a small sigh. That sigh carried a full review. The writer immediately stands up. So, what did you think? Since the kid already read it without permission, he says the least Do-hyun can do is give an honest opinion. Do-hyun apologizes for reading it. The man waves it off. No need for that, just tell me what you think. Privately though, he doubts the kid even understood the plot. Honestly, he'd be impressed if the boy could summarize it. Instead, Do-hyun bluntly says exactly what's on his mind. It's boring. Fatality. The writer is visibly stunned. He asks whether Do-hyun actually understood the story. Realizing how harsh he sounded, Do-hyun apologizes. He admits he's simply bad at sugarcoating his thoughts. Critical hit landed directly on the author's ego. Irritated, the writer demands to know what exactly was boring. Do-hyun points to the slow pacing. The writer immediately defends one particular scene, insisting it's an emotional moment about sacrifice and reconciliation. Do-hyun disagrees. To him, the scene feels forced. The writer snaps and calls him a heartless brat. Meanwhile, Do-hyun calmly explains that the ending fails because Yu's decision doesn't make logical sense. The writer argues that he'd planted clues throughout the script. He assumes the kid simply failed to notice them. Big mistake. Without missing a beat, Do-hyun lists the exact scene numbers where every clue appears. The writer goes completely silent. There's no way this kid memorized everything after reading it once. He grabs the script back and starts checking page after page. Every single reference is correct. His disbelief slowly turns into genuine admiration. Meanwhile, Do-hyun explains that Yu's motivation feels inconsistent and contradictory. He argues that someone who fought so desperately to survive wouldn't suddenly sacrifice himself so easily. The writer reluctantly realizes the kid actually has a point. Sometimes the comment section cooks. The discussion quickly turns into a full-blown argument. Neither one accepts being dismissed as old man or kid. They glare at each other like two rivals preparing for a final boss fight. Pure stubbornness versus pure stubbornness. Eventually, both turn away in frustration. The argument ends without either side backing down. I'm leaving, Do-hyun says. Go ahead, the writer replies. They part with anything but friendly farewells. Left alone in the gazebo, the writer collapses back onto the bench. He replays the entire argument in his head. One hand on his forehead, he wonders what on earth he was thinking. He really argued with a child like they were equals. At 34 years old, Bro got into a debate arc with an elementary schooler. Meanwhile, Do-hyun walks home wearing a guilty expression. Thinking back on the conversation, he admits he was far too blunt. The man had every right to get angry. With a regretful sigh, Do-hyun realizes his honesty probably crossed the line. Looking down the street, he decides he should go back and apologize properly. The scene shifts to the front of the school, signaling another day of student life. The following afternoon, the cafeteria buzzes with students chatting over lunch. Do-hyun sits alone, quietly eating while lost in thought. From another table, Nikki watches him with obvious disdain. In Nikki's mind, the new kid is just acting cool. Main character Aura is causing side effects again. Without warning, Jin Lassia sits beside Do-hyun. Noticing his distant expression, she asks what's bothering him. Do-hyun apologizes for making her worry. She doesn't let it go. Instead, she insists on hearing what's wrong. She proudly claims she's great at giving advice. Confident level, anime best friend. He hesitates for a moment, then he decides to trust her. He explains that he argued with someone the previous day and has no idea how to apologize. Jin asks whether the other person was an adult. Do-hyun nods and says they had only just met. Overhearing the conversation, Nikki immediately panics. In his head, this only confirms the transfer student is exactly the troublemaker he imagined. The girl asks what started the fight. Do-hin explains that they clashed over different opinions. He adds that the man kept talking down to him because of his age. Eventually, he argued back, and the disagreement escalated. Closing his eyes, Do-hin quietly admits he regrets being rude. He even feels sorry for bringing the whole story up. To his complete surprise, Jin suddenly jumps to her feet. She looks genuinely outraged. She declares that she also hates adults who dismiss children just because they're young. Being young doesn't mean they know nothing. She grabs both of Do-hin's hands tightly in support. Then she gives him firm advice. Under no circumstances should he be the first one to apologize. With unwavering determination, Jin doubles down, convinced that Do-hin is the one who's in the right. Jin's fierce defense catches Do-hin completely by surprise. Still trying to process everything she just said, he quietly nods. Meanwhile, Nikki watches from across the room. The moment he notices them holding hands, his irritation skyrockets. Bro's jealousy meter just hit 100%. In his head, he wonders if those two are complete idiots. The scene shifts to the front of the school. Later, back in class, the teacher announces today's art activity. There won't be any assigned topic. Everyone is free to draw whatever they like. Unlimited creativity DLC unlocked. Do-hin opens his sketchbook and pauses, wondering what to create. Then he remembers the only guideline: draw something you love. An idea instantly comes to him. Without hesitation, his pencil begins moving across the page. He shuts out the entire classroom. Nothing exists except the drawing taking shape beneath his hand. Maximum concentration activated. Every stroke comes straight from the deepest part of his heart. Across the room, Mrs. Julia organizes classroom supplies. Suddenly, excited whispers spread among the students. She turns around and reminds everyone to stay in their seats and focus on their drawings. One student excitedly calls out, "Mrs. Julia, Do-hin's drawing is amazing." Curiosity immediately gets the better of her. She walks over and looks over his shoulder. The moment she sees the sketch, she's left speechless. That wasn't on the elementary school curriculum. The pencil drawing almost seems to radiate warmth. Even though it's only a single portrait, she can feel just how deeply the artist treasures the person in it. Every line carries affection, admiration, love, and overwhelming longing. Do-hin notices her standing behind him and turns around in surprise. She gently asks who the person in the drawing is. The other students quickly gather around his desk. Several of them excitedly comment that he looks like a real artist. Instantly surrounded again. Poor guy can't catch a break. Feeling awkward, Do-hin looks around, wondering when everyone crowded around him. Mrs. Julia calms the class. She points out he can't answer with everyone talking at once. Once the room quiets down, she softly repeats her question. Who is the young man in the portrait? For a brief moment, she wonders about the smiling figure in the artwork. He looks so genuinely happy. Looking down at the page, Do-hin quietly answers, "It's him." Mrs. Julia asks if the man is a member of his family. Do-hin gently shakes his head. She watches him with growing curiosity, trying to understand their connection. One thing is obvious. Whoever this person is, they mean the world to him. Do-hin smiles softly. "Yes, he means a great deal to me." Looking lovingly at the portrait of young Hae-sung, he repeats that the man is incredibly precious to him. The classroom falls completely silent. His words leave both the teacher and the students deeply moved. Meanwhile, Mrs. Julia can't help noticing something else. Somehow, Do-hin resembles the man in the drawing. The resemblance buff has been quietly equipped. By evening, warm sunlight washes over the Seo family's large home. Back in his room, Do-hin sits alone at his desk. His eyes remain fixed on the portrait he drew earlier. One drawing isn't enough. It can't fill the emptiness inside him. Resting his head on the desk, he quietly admits how desperately he misses Hae-sung. Grief continues eating away at him. He wonders why he's still alive if living only means enduring this much pain. Despair overwhelms him. For a fleeting moment, he wishes he weren't here anymore. Then a mysterious voice suddenly interrupts. What would you rather choose? Well, that's one way to enter a conversation. The glowing blob appears outside his window. Recognizing it immediately, Do-hin calls it by name in surprise. The little light doesn't waste any time. Instead, it scolds him. Hae-sung gave up his own soul so Do-hin could live, yet he's making no effort to heal. The entity bluntly calls him selfish and foolish. According to it, he's throwing away the life that was bought with such an enormous sacrifice. Head lowered, Do-hin wonders if his feelings really are wrong. Then anger suddenly replaces his sadness. He stands up. Voice shaking, he shouts that Hae-sung lied to him. He left him behind all alone. I never asked for any of this. The emotional dam finally breaks. He remembers telling Hae-sung that he wanted to leave this world together. He'd meant every single word. Instead of surviving like this, he would have preferred fading away while holding on to those happy memories. Living with someone else's soul was never what he wanted. He demands to know why he's the only one forced to keep their promise, when Hae-sung was the one who broke his first. Yeah, that's not exactly an easy argument to answer. Staring at the glowing blob by the window, he desperately searches for some explanation. Tears stream down his face. Clutching his own shirt, he once again asks whether he's really the one who's wrong. The little blob says nothing. It simply watches his pain in silence. Sometimes silence hits harder than dialogue. The following day at school, Jin Lassia notices him sitting quietly at his desk. She asks why he isn't drawing today. She reminds him how talented he is. Even Mrs. Julia couldn't stop talking about his artwork yesterday. Do-hyun lowers his eyes and quietly shakes his head. I'm not really interested in drawing. Jin looks genuinely surprised. She tells him that would be such a waste. So, you're never going to draw again? The question lingers in his mind. He suddenly realizes something painful. He doesn't have a single photograph of Haesung. Memory storage, critically low. Maybe preserving those memories through drawings isn't pointless after all. After thinking it over, he changes his answer. Maybe, I'll draw once in a while. Jin immediately lights up with excitement. She happily says she can't wait to see his next drawing. Then she tells him yesterday's portrait was beautiful. It even made her happy. The compliment makes Do-hyun blush. A moment later, she remembers the conversation they had before. She asks what happened with the argument. Only then does Do-hyun realize he had completely forgotten about it. The girl asks whether he's apologized yet, and he admits he's planning to do it later that day. Jin Lassia surprises him by admitting her own advice came off harsh too, showing a far more thoughtful side than he expected. She tells him that if he acted rudely, apologizing is simply the right thing to do, completely catching him off guard. Do-hyun realizes she'd always seemed like nothing more than an energetic girl, but the more he learns about her, the stranger, in a good way, she becomes. Guess first impressions filed the wrong paperwork. He concludes she's incredibly good with people and obviously one of the most well-liked students in class. Later, staring into a mirror, Do-hyun can't understand why someone as popular as Jin would ever want to be friends with someone like him. In his own eyes, he's painfully ordinary, awkward, and has absolutely nothing worth bringing into a friendship. Self-esteem really clocked out for the day. On a bright autumn afternoon, he decides to return to the same park he visited the previous day. When he arrives, he spots the writer sitting on the familiar bench, and hesitates before getting any closer. The man is busy writing just like before, but it doesn't take long for him to notice the boy standing nearby. He slowly raises his head with a stern expression, and Do-hyun instinctively shrinks back. The two silently lock eyes across the plaza. Neither says a word, each waiting for the other to make the opening move. It's basically a verbal boss fight with no dialogue yet. Finally summoning his courage, Do-hyun steps forward, clears his throat, and says he came to apologize for their argument. The writer freezes in disbelief as the boy bows respectfully while offering the apology. He immediately feels ashamed of himself for arguing with a child, only to have that same child apologize first, realizing how immature he'd been. Do-hyun apologizes as well for yelling at an adult, admitting he shouldn't have lost his temper. Trying to shake off the awkwardness, the writer shifts sideways on the bench and changes the subject. Looking slightly embarrassed, he picks up several script pages, eager to show his young critic something. With a smug little grin, he reveals he rewrote parts of the story after thinking about everything they discussed. Then he hands over the script and asks if Do-hyun would read the new version. The boy begins reading while the writer confidently watches him, casually sipping his drink. Confident on the outside. Internally, absolutely buffering. A brief flashback reveals the writer spent the entire night rewriting the script, fueled entirely by the kid's criticism. Back in the present, he eagerly asks what Do-hyun honestly thinks. The boy stays quiet, so the writer encourages him not to hold back, reminding him he's always brutally honest. Seeing that serious expression, the writer starts panicking, convinced the story is boring all over again. Bro was preparing for emotional damage. He can't understand what went wrong after pouring his heart into the rewrite. But Do-hyun actually thinks the script is excellent now, with stronger pacing and none of the dull moments from before. As he reflects on it, he mentally reviews the story itself. It follows two people whose lives couldn't be more different. Isaiah, a wealthy young man, and Yu, a homeless pickpocket. Although both characters matter, the narrative mainly focuses on Yu. At first, Yu resents Isaiah because the rich boy offers kindness, something completely foreign to someone raised on the streets. Consumed by that bitterness, Yu lies in an attempt to ruin Isaiah's life, hoping to drag him into the same misery he has always known. Over time, though, Yu slowly opens his heart, and the two develop a genuine bond. When the story reaches its climax, Yu sacrifices his own life to save Isaiah, smiling even as he meets his end. Yeah, that's not exactly a walk-it-off moment. After finishing the script, Do-hyun quietly reaches a surprising conclusion. Maybe the problem was never the story. Maybe it was him. He calls the writer over, and the man eagerly asks what he thinks. Instead of praising the script, Do-hyun tells him he should ask someone else for feedback. The answer completely stuns the writer. Do-hyun quickly explains the writing isn't the issue. The real problem is that he simply can't understand Yu's emotions. The writer meets his eyes with unwavering determination. He tells the boy that's exactly his responsibility, to make those feelings understandable. His expression leaves no room for doubt. He has no intention of giving up on his toughest critic. Side quests? Ignored. Converting this kid is the main mission. He reminds himself of his goal, creating a story capable of moving anyone who reads it. A line echoes in his thoughts, wondering when someone will return to that place. Do-hyun. The boy insists once more that someone else should read the script instead. But the writer firmly reminds him he'd already promised to convince him. Faced with that relentless confidence, Do-hyun can only stare back in stunned silence. A distant memory suddenly surfaces. He remembers insisting during an old argument that there was nothing wrong with his emotional sensitivity, and refusing to see the other person's point. Another memory follows, showing the two working together as Do-hyun admits one of the rewritten scenes is much better. Their constant creative arguments gradually become productive, each debate ending with intense eye contact instead of agreement. Professional hater, promoted to co-editor. In another memory, the writer jokingly calls him a picky brat. Without missing a beat, Do-hyun fires back that the writer is the one who refuses to leave him alone. During another discussion, the writer points to a scene involving Isaiah and asks whether it wouldn't make him feel differently. He argues that Isaiah would naturally feel pity or compassion for you. Do-hyun agrees with that interpretation. But the writer pushes the idea further, saying Isaiah would also feel a subtle sense of superiority. That single word catches Do-hyun completely off guard. Even so, after thinking it over, he admits he understands exactly what the writer means. He pauses, saying the idea makes sense, but he's worried about the consequences of changing it, because if they follow that interpretation, he'll have to rewrite almost Yu's entire personality. 3 weeks pass after they reconcile, and before long the two are meeting every 2 or 3 days to keep debating the story together. Over those 3 weeks, Liam rewrites the script 6 separate times. The workload never scares him, he's only obsessed with making it better. Perfectionism really unlocked a premium subscription. Across the table, Do-hyun silently watches, waiting to see whether Liam will abandon his latest idea or throw himself into another rewrite. The writer stares down at his hands, torn between letting it go or diving right back into the endless editing cycle. For someone who had spent his life reading other people's stories, building an entirely new world alongside this boy brings a kind of joy he'd never experienced before. Meanwhile, Do-hyun has discovered that creating a story is just as exciting as reading one, and now he wants to give everything he has to help shape it. Locked in, he studies every line of the script with total focus. Bro entered editor mode and forgot reality existed. Liam tries to get his attention, but the boy doesn't react at all, completely absorbed in the pages. Only after a moment does Do-hyun finally look up, smiling brightly as he innocently asks what Liam wanted. At that exact moment, Liam gets the eerie feeling that someone else has suddenly stepped into the room. Totally normal Tuesday. Inside his imagination, the scene from the script comes to life. Isaiah happily calls out for a priest. A beam of light appears. The priest steps into it, and Isaiah runs over, asking what brought him there. Then it hits Liam. The boy isn't simply reading the script, he's performing it. The very page in Do-hyun's hands matches the scene Liam is seeing unfold inside his mind. Playing Isaiah, Do-hyun cheerfully tells the priest that he's become close friends with Yu and now brings him cookies every single day. He casually adds that it's no big deal since there are always leftovers at home anyway. Then he explains that Yu has no parents and that he's only following the priest's advice to help people in need. Resting a hand over his chest, he says he's happy to give Yu anything that might make the lonely boy smile, wholesome enough to deal critical damage. He finishes the scene wearing an innocent smile, saying those small acts of kindness cost him absolutely nothing. The vision disappears, and Liam snaps back to reality. All he can do is stare at Do-hyun in complete silence. He's utterly stunned by what he just witnessed. As he studies the performance, Liam notices something fascinating. Isaiah's expression isn't humble, it's satisfied. Just that tiny adjustment completely changes the emotional tone of the entire scene. Even more impressive, Do-hyun communicates incredibly layered emotions without exaggerating a single movement. Meanwhile, Liam's brain is running at 300 FPS. He can't stop imagining what this kid could become if that talent were captured on film. His heart starts racing. He realizes this chance could completely transform his future. Still confused by the silence, Do-hyun calls out to him, snapping Liam out of his dream about what lies ahead. Leaning forward, the writer asks a question with brand new intensity. What's your name? Despite spending weeks together, neither of them had ever introduced themselves. The boy calmly replies that his name is Do-hyun. Liam repeats it to himself so he won't forget before introducing himself in return as Liam Hoff. Next, his attention shifts to the case Do-hyun always carries. He's surprised to discover it's a violin case. Instant panic. Liam immediately imagines the tragedy of cinema losing an acting prodigy to the music world. Fortunately for his blood pressure, Do-hyun explains he doesn't actually know how to play the violin. That answer only leaves Liam even more confused. The boy explains the case holds something deeply precious to him, which is why he never lets it out of his sight. Do-hyun. Something suddenly clicks inside Liam's head. Every scattered piece finally connects. Do-hyun, Yu, the violin. Achievement unlocked. Massive epiphany. His eyes light up with inspiration. At last he knows exactly what the story has been missing. Without wasting a second, he furiously starts writing down every new idea flooding his mind. Do-hyun tries speaking to him, but Liam is so completely consumed by inspiration that he doesn't hear a single word. Seeing the writer disappear into his own creative universe, the boy quietly decides he'll just come back another day. As he's about to leave, Liam suddenly shouts his name. Do-hyun stops instantly. The writer quickly arranges another meeting for the following week. Same place, same time. With absolute conviction, Liam insists, Do-hyun, you cannot miss our next meeting, no matter what. The boy simply stands there, slightly startled by the man's explosive enthusiasm. Deep down, he starts wondering whether endless rewriting has finally fried Liam's brain. Fair question, honestly. The scene shifts to the exterior of a large school building under the daylight. Now at school, Do-hyun stands alone on a grassy field while two boys happily run around playing nearby. He watches from a distance with a quiet, serious, almost lonely expression. Liam's excited voice echoes in his thoughts, reminding him not to miss their next meeting. Even remembering it, Do-hyun still can't quite understand why the writer got so worked up. Looking down, he notices a soccer ball resting on the grass and silently wonders what on earth got into that man. A girl named Jackie calls out to him and asks him to pass her the ball, trying to pull him into the game. Before moving, Do-hyun instinctively measures the distance between them. She's roughly 20 meters away. His mind immediately begins calculating force, acceleration, and air resistance to deliver the perfect kick. Bro turned a simple pass into a physics exam. Before he can even swing his leg, another student rushes in and steals the ball. Caught completely off guard, Do-hyun watches as the boy runs away with it. Nicholas laughs, teasing that he should have kicked it sooner. Then he sprints through the field with impressive skill and effortlessly scores. Jackie walks over to reassure Do-hyun, telling him it's okay because they'll score next time. Unfortunately, Nicholas keeps dominating the match, piling up goal after goal for his side. Main character energy, just assigned to the wrong player. When the game finally ends, the winning team celebrates together. Meanwhile, Do-hyun quietly remains in the background, disappointed by how little he contributed. Completely drained, he drops onto the grass, trying to catch his breath. After wearing himself out, Do-hyun realizes something important. Knowing everything from books doesn't mean much if your body can't keep up. Looks like stamina isn't downloadable after all. The scene shifts to a large, modern house, which appears to be Do-hyun's new home. Inside, he changes into a tracksuit, preparing to head back outside. A woman asks where he's going. He casually replies that he's just taking a walk around the neighborhood. Hearing that nearly brings her to tears. The boy who once spent his life in a hospital is now choosing to exercise on his own. Character development hit harder than leg day. She tells him not to overdo it and reminds him to come home if he gets exhausted. Do-hyun agrees before jogging off. During his run, he reaches a fork in the road. After a brief pause, he decides to explore the unfamiliar route instead. The adventure DLC has officially begun. He follows the sidewalk at an easy, steady pace. Then another sound slowly replaces the city noise. Ocean waves. Before long, he arrives at the beach. His eyes light up as the endless sea stretches across the horizon. Completely captivated, he walks to the shoreline and lets the waves wash over his feet. It's the first time he's ever seen the ocean. The only thing that keeps the moment from being perfect is realizing his brother isn't there to experience it with him. While staring toward the horizon, he notices something moving atop a large rock far out in the water. Curiosity instantly wins. Without hesitation, Do-hyun starts wading into the sea. Step by step, he moves farther from shore, determined to see whatever caught his attention. Bro saw one mysterious shape and accepted the side quest immediately. He figures that getting just a little closer should reveal what it is. Before he can continue, someone suddenly grabs him from behind. Startled, Do-hyun spins around. It's Nicholas, the same boy from the soccer match. Nicholas practically shouts, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. He looks genuinely terrified. Then he grabs Do-hyun by the shoulders and shakes him, asking if he was seriously planning to walk into the deep ocean alone. Fair question, honestly. Do-hyun tells him to stop because the shaking is making him dizzy. Nicholas calms himself enough to ask again. This time, Do-hyun explains he only wanted to investigate something. Still standing in the water, he points toward the distant rock. Nicholas follows his gaze. Resting peacefully on top is an adorable baby sea lion. So, that's what you were after? Nicholas asks. He explains that sea lions normally stay in groups, making it strange to see one completely alone. Then he suggests they go check on it. As they move forward, Nicholas complains that the waves make walking almost impossible. A second later, he shrugs it off. He's already soaked anyway. Might as well commit to the bit. With that, he dives straight into the ocean. He swims with impressive skill, clearly used to the water. Watching from behind, Do-hyun can't hide his surprise or admiration. It doesn't take long before Nicholas climbs onto the rock and waves him over. Do-hyun silently thinks his friend somehow excels at every sport imaginable. Meanwhile, powerful waves crash against the rocks, making it obvious how dangerous the area really is. When Do-hyun finally reaches him, Nicholas asks why he never swam over. The answer is simple. He doesn't know how to swim. That explains a lot. Nicholas drops the subject and says they should first figure out what to do about the little sea lion. Stepping closer, he asks the pup why it's sitting there all alone. The tiny animal simply squeaks in response. Then, completely out of nowhere, it hops off the rock and lands directly in Do-hyun's lap. The distribution system chose its target. Completely confused, Do-hyun stares at the pup. Nicholas laughs and jokes that maybe it mistook him for its mother. Holding the little sea lion gently, Do-hyun tells it its parents are probably waiting and encourages it to go home. As he softly pets its head, he asks whether it remembers the way back. Apparently it does. The pup dives into the sea and swims away toward the open ocean. Both boys stand there in stunned silence. That solution worked way faster than either of them expected. Watching it disappear into the distance, Nicholas sighs in relief that they won't have to carry it back themselves. Once they return to shore, Nicholas immediately starts shivering in his soaked clothes. Seeing that, Do-hyun quietly removes his own jacket and drapes it over his friend's shoulders. Nicholas complains that he seems to be the only one freezing. Do-hyun admits he's cold too. He just says he can tolerate it. Meanwhile, Nicholas's pride is losing a 1v1 against basic kindness. As they walk home together, Do-hyun suddenly calls out to him. With complete sincerity, he thanks Nicholas for everything he did that day. Nicholas brushes it off, saying the sea lion found its own way home anyway. But Do-hyun shakes his head. That's not what he's talking about. He's grateful because Nicholas rushed into the ocean without a second thought, simply because he was worried about him. Those words instantly leave Nicholas completely flustered. He turns away, unable to hide his embarrassment. Critical hit. It's super effective. Still blushing, he tells Do-hyun to knock it off and just stay grateful while awkwardly marching ahead. He does everything he can to hide his red face. Watching the reaction, Do-hyun smiles to himself. The mood quickly turns playful as they continue chatting. At one point, Do-hyun laughs and calls Nicholas cute. Nicholas immediately objects, insisting he's cool instead. Respectfully, the blush says otherwise. When Do-hyun finally returns home completely drenched, the woman taking care of him panics and demands to know what happened. The following morning at school, one of the girls notices Nicholas's desk is still empty and wonders why he hasn't arrived. Just then, a blonde classmate enters the room and cheerfully greets Do-hyun. Jin walks over and asks whether something is wrong because he doesn't look well. Do-hyun explains he's worried since Nicholas still hasn't shown up. Jin immediately responds by calling their friend an idiot. Do-hyun is caught off guard when Jin casually calls Nicholas an idiot. She quickly explains that Nikki, her nickname for him, is homesick after catching a cold from swimming in the ocean yesterday. Consequences have entered the chat. Guilt immediately washes over Do-hyun. He stops Jin because there's something he has to confess. He admits Nicholas only jumped into the ocean because he was trying to save him, taking full responsibility for everything that happened. Jin is left completely stunned. She has no idea what he's talking about. Cue the mandatory flashback explanation. The scene smoothly skips ahead, implying Do-hyun fills her in on everything that happened at the beach. Once she hears the whole story, everything clicks. She adds that Nikki also got a serious lecture from his mother afterward. Then Jin folds her arms and gives Do-hyun a sharp scolding of her own. She tells him walking into the ocean without even knowing how to swim was unbelievably reckless. That disappointed stare alone does psychic damage. Feeling genuinely guilty, Do-hyun quietly accepts it. After class, he suggests they visit Nikki together. Jin agrees, mentioning Nicholas's older sister Narcia should be at home. Later, they arrive at Nicholas's house. A young woman with short hair welcomes them with a cheerful smile, immediately calling Jin adorable. Without hesitation, she wraps Jin in a big hug, saying she missed her. Jin happily hugs her back while calling her sis. Wholesome levels approaching dangerous. Only then does Narcia notice the unfamiliar boy standing nearby. Curious, she asks Jin who her new companion is. Jin steps aside, giving Do-hyun room to introduce himself. A little nervous, he politely greets her. He introduces himself as Lee Do-hyun and explains that he came to check on Nicholas. The moment Narcia hears his name and gets a proper look at his face, she completely freezes and starts blushing. Her brain immediately blue-screened. Inside her head, she's absolutely stunned. She never imagined Nikki's friend would be this quiet, polite, and unbelievably adorable. Seeing Narcia standing motionless, Jin asks if something's wrong. Snapping out of it, Narcia quickly invites them inside. Once they're in the house, she tells them Nicholas is upstairs and should already be awake. She also mentions his fever was extremely high the previous night, though he's finally starting to recover. Then she casually adds that once he's healthy again, he's getting the scolding of a lifetime. Do-hyun visibly tenses. Before Narcia heads upstairs, he stops her. He admits the whole incident was his fault. Nicholas only ran into the ocean because he saw Do-hyun walking into the water first and panicked. Narcia asks if that's really what happened. Do-hyun bows deeply while apologizing and confirms every word. Accountability? Rare but appreciated. Curious, Narcia asks what possessed him to enter the ocean in the first place. He explains he spotted something unusual on a rock offshore and wanted a closer look. He simply wandered farther into the water without realizing how deep it had become. Narcia closes her eyes with a knowing smile. Honestly, she expected the explanation to be something weird like that. Inwardly, she reflects that Nicholas somehow only attracts unusual people into his life, probably contagious at this point. She asks what was actually sitting on the rock. Do-hyun answers that it was a baby sea lion. Narcia immediately decides that combining an adorable kid with an adorable animal is unfair to her heart. Then Do-hyun quietly makes one sincere request. He asks her not to punish Nicholas. Critical cuteness activated. The innocent plea melts Narcia instantly. She agrees on the spot. Standing nearby, Jin quietly whispers that Do-hyun just saved Nikki from getting chewed out. Narcia points toward Nicholas's room and tells him to go ahead. Do-hyun politely thanks her before entering. Jin walks in first, loudly calling Nikki's name. Nicholas grumbles about the noise until he realizes who's there. She tells him Do-hyun came to visit too. Nicholas practically short-circuits. He points straight at Do-hyun and blurts out, asking why he's here. Do-hyun calmly answers that he heard Nicholas was sick. A flashback immediately pops into Nicholas's mind. He remembers Do-hyun laughing at him yesterday on the beach. The memory still feels humiliating. So this visit makes absolutely no sense to him. Bro's trust issues are working overtime. Jin immediately scolds Nicholas for being rude. Before things escalate, Do-hyun explains the whole situation was just a misunderstanding. When he laughed yesterday, he wasn't making fun of Nicholas. He was laughing because he honestly thought Nicholas looked incredibly cool. Nicholas stares at him in total confusion. Do-hyun repeats that he's being completely serious. He says watching Nicholas dive into the ocean like that was genuinely impressive. Unexpected compliment. Maximum emotional damage. Nicholas's face instantly turns bright red. Speechless and flustered, he finally mutters that if that's the truth, then he'll forgive him. Do-hyun quietly smiles. A moment later, Nicholas starts coughing. Taking that as his cue, Do-hyun wishes him a speedy recovery before saying goodbye. As they step into the hallway, Narcia meets them outside the room. She asks if they're already leaving. She invites them to stay for dinner. Jin politely declines, so Narcia offers to drive both of them home instead. Fast travel unlocked. The next scene shows a luxury car parked outside, making it clear Nicholas's family is quite wealthy. Narcia drives while thanking both of them for coming to see her brother. She also asks Do-hyun to keep being Nikki's friend, and to visit again sometime. As the city passes outside the window, Do-hyun quietly watches the scenery. He can't help noticing how deeply Nicholas is loved by his family. A forgotten childhood memory quietly resurfaces. He remembers a woman with a warm smile, someone who appears to be his mother. The memories continue. No matter how busy his parents were, they always prepared his lunch. Every morning they woke him up. Every afternoon they welcomed him home with smiling faces. Some memories hit softer than any plot twist. Still lost in thought, Do-hyun doesn't notice the ride ending until Narcia announces they've arrived. He steps out of the car and thanks her for bringing them home. She smiles and tells him to take care. Just as he's about to leave, Jin grabs his arm. She calls his name and asks him to wait a second. Do-hyun turns around, confused, silently waiting for her explanation. Jin leans close and quietly whispers into his ear that she'd already figured out he and Nikki weren't actually that close. Jin's confession blindsides Do-hyun so completely that he has no clue how he's supposed to respond. She explains that Nikki only acts like that around people he actually cares about, and his attitude is nothing more than stubborn pride. Before leaving, Jin says she'd love to see the two of them become friends because they're both precious to her. Those two words, important friends, echo in Do-hyun's head, quietly warming his heart. Then, without warning, an old memory crashes in. He remembers his brother lying in a hospital bed, telling him not to settle for simply staying alive, but to find happiness too. Do-hyun can't understand why those words are resurfacing now. Timing really picked the dramatic DLC. Rather than going home, he wanders into a park and drops onto a lonely bench. He admits to himself that, for some reason, the idea of returning home just doesn't appeal to him. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted when his phone buzzes inside his pocket. Checking the screen, he finds a message from Liam Hoff saying the script is finally complete. The scene shifts to a quiet gazebo, where someone is already waiting. Do-hyun approaches a blonde-haired man sitting calmly on a bench. Liam turns around with a huge grin and happily says he's been looking forward to this moment. Practically vibrating with excitement, he shoves a stack of pages into Do-hyun's hands and urges him to start reading immediately. Do-hyun almost asks what all the excitement is about, but decides the script will answer that question first. As he silently reads through every page, Liam watches him with expectations so high they could reach orbit. A gentle breeze drifts through the park, leaving only peaceful silence between them. After several moments, Do-hyun finally lifts his head, having reached the last page. He places the script on the wooden table and prepares to give an honest opinion. Looking Liam straight in the eyes, he says the screenplay is genuinely impressive. Liam instantly lights up like he just unlocked the secret ending. Laughing proudly, he declares that he expected nothing less because a masterpiece written by the legendary Liam Hoff was inevitable. Do-hyun quietly watches as Liam leans back, clutching the script against his chest while laughing from pure happiness. Then, without warning, Liam jumps to his feet and slaps the document on the table, startling him. With a calm smile, the writer sincerely thanks Do-hyun. Confused, Do-hyun wonders what he's being thanked for. Liam explains that the screenplay never would have existed without his help. The next revelation hits even harder. Liam intends to credit Do-hyun as the script's co-writer. He explains that Do-hyun's feedback shaped every chapter, making that recognition completely deserved. Hearing that his own name could appear on the screenplay makes his heart pound. Still uncertain, he argues that all he really did was offer opinions. Resting his chin on one hand, Liam smiles as he remembers all the discussions they'd had together and flatly refuses to let Do-hyun reject the offer. Cornered by kindness, honestly, that's a rare boss fight. Do-hyun finally accepts the honor and thanks him. Trying to hide how emotional he feels, Liam casually insists it was only natural. The atmosphere stays warm as Do-hyun notices the writer's awkward attempt to conceal his embarrassment. Smiling softly, he points out that Liam actually has a surprisingly childish side beneath his normally cold personality. The two continue chatting comfortably while sunlight spills across the wooden table in the peaceful park. Eventually, sadness quietly settles over Do-hyun. Finishing the screenplay also means the end of their daily meetings. He asks if Liam is going to stop coming to the park. The question catches the writer completely by surprise. Liam's eyes widen as the reality of the situation finally sinks in. He gulps after realizing he forgot to mention the most important part. Film production will require months of work, including casting actors and searching for suitable filming locations. Do-hyun encourages him, praising his abilities while Liam silently watches with obvious tension. Finally gathering enough courage, Liam gets straight to the point. He invites Do-hyun to become part of the movie. Yeah, that's a little bigger than a small favor. The unexpected proposal leaves Do-hyun frozen, mouth hanging open as he struggles to process what he just heard. Liam doubles down and makes himself perfectly clear. He wants Do-hyun to join the production, not behind the scenes, but as one of the actors. Later, the story shifts to the large, bustling school where Do-hyun spends most of his days. Inside the classroom, he rests his cheek against one hand, completely lost in thought. His mental vacation ends when the teacher suddenly calls his name and asks him to solve a problem. Walking between the rows with her materials in hand, she patiently waits for his answer. A blonde classmate quietly whispers his name over and over until he finally snaps back to reality. Bro's brain was buffering. Startled, Do-hyun jumps to his feet and focuses on the textbook question. He answers correctly without hesitation, though he vaguely remembers seeing the solution somewhere before. The teacher praises him but reminds him to pay attention during class instead of drifting off. Do-hyun sincerely apologizes. Satisfied, she lets the matter go and allows him to sit back down. Even after the interruption, his thoughts quickly wander again. His mind returns to Liam's words about how the story only worked because it had been inspired by him. In that memory, Do-hyun insists he has no acting experience. Liam immediately replies, "Everyone needs to start somewhere." He repeats the invitation, insisting Do-hyun possesses natural talent and a screen presence that was practically made for acting. The daydream shatters when someone suddenly yells, making Do-hyun flinch with his spoon still in hand. Looking up, he finds his two blonde classmates staring at him with unmistakable curiosity. One of them asks why he's been so distracted during lunch, and points out that everyone else has already left the cafeteria. While resting his chin on his hand, the blonde boy asks if Do-hyun is actually going to finish his food, instantly making him feel guilty. Trying to ease the awkward mood, the blonde girl comments that the silence is kind of relaxing before casually asking for a bite of his meal. Honestly, free food negotiations never fail. Back in his room, Do-hyun sits on the floor with his back against an easel and focuses on a blank canvas. His brush glides across the fabric, laying down the first streaks of gray paint. After a few strokes, he pauses, turning his head while quietly sinking into thought. Looking over the canvas now covered in muddy dark smears, he admits it's a complete disaster. The painting really entered its abstract because I gave up phase. He rubs his forehead wearily and admits everything has been falling apart ever since he tried refusing Liam's proposal. His thoughts drift back to Liam confidently asking whether he truly loved acting. That memory alone earns him a long, exhausted sigh as he struggles under the weight of the decision. Meanwhile, Liam is shown outside, putting away his phone after sending Do-hyun a message, asking them to meet. The story then shifts to the bright entrance of a cozy cafe called N Coffee. Two steaming cups sit on a pale wooden table, waiting for the conversation to begin. Coffee, the unofficial boss battle arena. Seated across from Liam, Do-hyun finally works up the nerve to speak. He tells him, without hesitation, that he'll accept the acting role. The answer leaves Liam staring in complete disbelief before his eyes light up with excitement. Unable to contain himself, he immediately calls Do-hyun the star of the movie. Before the celebration gets too far, Do-hyun raises one finger. Plot twist unlocked. Calm but unwavering, he says he wants to play you. Liam bursts into laughter, amused by the request, and casually agrees. Then his brain finally catches up with his mouth. His expression freezes as he realizes which character Do-hyun actually named. Liam had always pictured him as Isaiah and had already decided that role was perfect for him. Now he clutches his head, mentally watching his production schedule catch fire. Do-hyun calmly repeats that Yu is the role he wants. Liam immediately argues that Isaiah suits him far better. Resting his hand against his chin, the writer silently searches for an escape, while nervous enough to break into a cold sweat. Bro is speedrunning the 5 stages of panic. Leaning forward, Liam asks him seriously whether changing roles is absolutely non-negotiable. In his mind, Do-hyun's delicate appearance fits the refined young master Isaiah perfectly. Asked why he's so determined to play Yu instead, Do-hyun gives an honest answer. He wants to understand Yu better. Realizing there will be no changing his mind, Liam sighs in defeat before proposing a wager. Do-hyun will have exactly 1 week to prepare his own interpretation of the character. Smiling calmly, Liam promises that if the performance truly impresses him, Do-hyun wins. Otherwise, he'll stick with the original casting plan and play Isaiah instead. It's basically put up or shut up, but with scripts. Liam wears a smug grin, convinced the deal works in his favor regardless of the outcome. Without hiding his confidence, he openly declares he's certain he'll win. That confidence immediately irritates Do-hyun. He shoots back by asking if Liam is really that sure of himself. The writer folds his arms, answering only with a mysterious smile. Neither of them backs down as determination fills the silence between them. Finally, Do-hyun accepts the challenge out loud. Cue the training arc. Time moves forward beneath a bright afternoon sky overlooking the roof of Do-hyun's house. Inside his room, one hand presses firmly against the pages of an old screenplay covered in wrinkles and handwritten notes. Sitting at his desk beside the sunlit window, Do-hyun says he's pushed every conversation from those park meetings out of his mind. He wants to read the script as though he's seeing it for the very first time. Closing his dark eyes, he searches his imagination for inspiration. Almost instantly, a filthy room forms inside his mind. The floor is littered with cigarette butts, while damp mold hangs heavily in the air. Grimy walls are covered in hateful graffiti, surrounded by ripped posters. Yeah, definitely not getting 5 stars on the travel app. Deep within that bleak neighborhood, the quiet sound of sneakers breaks the silence. A young boy wearing a dark hoodie walks confidently through the alley, as if he's traveled it countless times before. He looks barely older than 10. Years of surviving in the slums have left him painfully thin. Keeping both hands buried inside his pockets, he hides what appears to be a stolen wallet. Do-hyun steps into the imagined scene and gently greets the boy. Watching him carefully, he asks how he's feeling today. The hooded child immediately looks at him with suspicion. He asks who this stranger is and tells him to stop acting like they're friends. Social interaction, mission failed. The conversation goes nowhere as the boy ignores him and simply keeps walking. Do-hyun asks what he ate for breakfast. The answer comes back instantly, nothing. Then Do-hyun asks an absurd question about socks. That finally pushes the hooded boy over the edge, and he tells him to get out of his way. Me too, buddy. Back at his desk, Do-hyun compares this creative process to layering paint over and over until the final image finally appears. He explains that he's been placing his imagined version of Yu into countless different situations to fully build the character. With his eyes shut, Do-hyun realizes the wall separating him from the character is gone. Yu's decisions no longer feel borrowed, they've become his own. He pulls open the curtains, letting sunlight flood the room as though bringing the imaginary boy into the real world. Method acting just entered ranked mode. Backpack over his shoulder, he heads for the door. Before he can leave, his mother's gentle voice calls him from the living room. The moment she sees his face, her words stop. Something about him feels different, and she cautiously asks whether anything is wrong. Without emotion, Do-hyun simply says everything is fine before turning away and walking out. Yeah, moms have a built-in lie detector. The story shifts to the school under the bright morning sun. Inside the classroom, his blonde classmate sits beside him, eager to talk about what happened the previous day. Do-hyun doesn't react at all. He simply stares blankly into space while his friend grows increasingly concerned. The blonde boy asks if he's even listening. A short "yeah" is the only reply he gets. Then, without warning, Do-hyun slams his hand onto the desk. He coldly snaps that he already said he was listening. Subtlety has officially left the chat. His sudden outburst shocks both classmates. The blonde boy immediately questions why he's acting so strangely. Still wearing the same icy expression, Do-hyun silently listens as his friend demands an explanation. His gaze only grows darker. Inside his mind, everything around him twists. The girl's voice becomes meaningless chatter, while the boy beside her is reduced to irritating noise. Yu's mindset has taken over completely. Every sound now fills him with overwhelming hatred. Realizing what's happening, Do-hyun suddenly snaps back to himself. He hurriedly apologizes and asks whether he behaved that badly. Trying to reassure them, he puts on a warm, welcoming smile. For one brief second, things almost seem normal. Then he repeats the exact same question. This time the smile remains, but his eyes turn frighteningly cold. Well, that definitely didn't help. Elsewhere, Liam strolls outside, hoping Do-hyun used the past week wisely. He remembers completely rewriting the young master's role after seeing the boy's previous performance. Even so, imagining him as a kid raised in the slums still feels impossible. Then Liam spots him. He freezes mid-step. The surprise is so strong he barely manages to say the young actor's name. Do-hyun stands waiting with both hands in his pockets while sunlight shines across his back. Main character entrance unlocked. Liam instinctively calls him by Yu's name instead. Do-hyun calmly confirms that the promised one-week deadline has ended. The writer praises his dedication. A faint smile appears on Do-hyun's face as he quietly says he came here to win. Liam warns him he won't go easy during the evaluation. Do-hyun answers that no amount of criticism will change the outcome. Confidence level, illegally high. Certain of his own victory, Liam opens the screenplay and asks which scene Do-hyun prepared. The answer catches him completely off guard. Do-hyun calmly says he prepared from the very beginning. Liam starts sweating as the realization sinks in. The boy memorized the entire script. Do-hyun only smiles while the writer struggles to believe someone learned all of it in just 1 week. Bro downloaded the script straight into RAM. Liam chooses scene 33 and asks him to begin from Yu's entrance. The stage is set along the road leading to the cathedral, where Yu is about to meet Isaiah. Do-hyun slowly closes his eyes. The signal is given. Without missing a beat, he steps into character. Walking between imaginary pews, he quietly says there's something important he needs to confess. Yu explains that Isaiah and everyone else prayed for him during yesterday's mass. His face darkens with guilt. He insists he isn't worthy of anyone's kindness. Taking Isaiah's hands, he admits he's terrified the local priest will never forgive him. Inside the silent chapel, sunlight pours through stained glass windows as he desperately pleads to be heard. Every trace of Do-hyun disappears. Only Yu's agony remains. He makes the sign of the cross. Then he softly finishes with, "Amen." Hands pressed against his chest, he confesses to violating the 8th commandment by bearing false witness. He explains that his parents are alive and well. Even so, he chose to abandon home and survive on his own. Looking ahead with painful honesty, he admits he also broke the fourth commandment by failing to honor his father and mother. He remembers being taught that life is a gift, but love for his parents never took root inside him. A heartbreaking image flashes by. A baby abandoned in a basket on the street. No pressure, just emotional damage. Curled up alone in the darkness, Yu remembers growing up neglected, never receiving even the most basic education. His eyes overflow with sorrow as he admits nobody ever cared for either his body or his soul. The confession only grows heavier. He reveals he also violated the seventh commandment against stealing. Rain pours over the city as memories show him wandering hungry with nowhere to live during freezing nights. To survive, he stole bread. Later, he stole money from others just so he could buy clothes and something to eat. Dropping to his knees, he desperately asks whether someone like him can still be forgiven. His confession continues. Now he admits breaking the 10th commandment by coveting what belonged to others. He remembers envying people dressed in clean clothes and polished shoes. With a broken expression, he asks if those feelings make him a demon. Then, barely holding himself together, he wonders if he's already living in hell. One last time, he begs for forgiveness that he believes can never be his. Darkness spreads across his face as he questions whether divine grace could ever reach someone as worthless as himself. Tears stream down Do-hyen's face as his performance reaches its emotional peak. Every ounce of fear on display feels painfully real. Behind Isaiah, the shadow of a massive serpent coils around his feet while Yu demands the truth. Gripping Isaiah's hands, he begs for proof, something real enough to finally believe. Yeah, emotional damage now comes with nightmare fuel. The giant snake looms in the background, making the chapel feel even more unsettling. Yu challenges Isaiah to prove that genuine kindness actually exists. Deep inside, however, he has no intention of accepting salvation. His real plan is to exploit Isaiah's compassion and pull him into the darkness with him. Talk about the worst possible coping mechanism. Liam stands frozen. Not a word comes out. A cold shiver races down his spine as sweat forms across his face. Watching Do-hyen disappear so completely into the role leaves him speechless. For the first time, Liam realizes he may have underestimated someone with terrifying natural talent. Boss fight status. Unexpected second phase. Slowly raising both hands, he surrenders. The bet is over. Do-hyen won. The announcement instantly lights up the young actor's face. His heart pounds so hard that he instinctively presses a hand against his chest. Even after the scene ends, he can't understand why it's racing so fast. Then it finally hits him. This is the first major success he's ever earned entirely through his own efforts. Liam suddenly bursts into loud laughter. He tells Do-hyen, things are going to get pretty hectic from here. Stuffing the screenplay into his bag, he starts listing everything waiting for them, finding filming locations, casting actors, and handling countless other tasks. Still smiling, Liam walks away and tells Do-hyen to call anytime he needs help. No pressure, just an entire movie to make. A few steps later, he abruptly turns back. He almost forgot the contract. While Liam brings up signing the paperwork, Do-hyen's thoughts immediately shift to one problem. How on earth is he supposed to explain all this to his mom? Fast forward to late afternoon. Warm sunlight fills the family's spacious home as Do-hyen announces that he's back. His mother quickly comes to the entrance to greet him. She happily says dinner is ready and asks if he'd like to eat immediately. Do-hyen politely answers that he'd like to wash up first. Mother Radar immediately detects positive vibes. Seeing him in such a good mood, she smiles with visible relief. The scene moves to the dinner table, where steaming soup and generous portions of meat have already been served. Do-hyen calmly thanks her for the meal. That simple gesture catches her completely off guard. Remembering how gloomy he'd seemed earlier, she quietly celebrates seeing him act like himself again. While eating in silence, Do-hyen keeps staring at his plate. He's carefully searching for the right moment to bring something up. Finally, he breaks the silence. He says he has an important request. His mother immediately promises she'll do whatever she can to help. Honestly, she accepted before reading the terms and conditions. The moment she hears the word movie, she beams with excitement. She happily offers to buy tickets and anything else he wants. Then her brain catches up with the rest of the sentence. Wait, what? Remaining perfectly calm, Do-hyen repeats that he wants to act in an actual film. Silence fills the dining room. His words hang in the air as his mother simply stares at him with wide eyes. Professional movie sets, cameras, and studios feel worlds away from their everyday life. Trying to make sense of it, she remembers how he used to practice lines back at the hospital. Looking at her son's handsome face, she decides letting talent and looks like his go to waste would be a crime. Excitement immediately takes over. She starts talking about acting lessons, auditions, and every possible way to support his dream. Mom unlocked manager mode. Embarrassed by her enthusiasm, Do-hyen thanks her sincerely. Then he casually drops another bombshell. He already has a guaranteed role. Critical hit. His mother blinks several times, completely unable to process what she just heard. The room falls silent again. Do-hyen watches her confused expression, unsure what she's thinking. She wonders when he even found time to audition. He calmly explains that things didn't happen the way she imagines. Straightening in her chair, she listens closely as he recounts everything that's happened over the past several months. Once he's finished, she covers her mouth with both hands. The overwhelming emotion isn't shock anymore, it's relief. Do-hyen ends by confirming he passed the audition. Pride shines across his mother's face as she realizes how far ahead he's already come. Filled with excitement over his achievement, she makes one thing perfectly clear. He's free to chase whatever dream he wants. Permission granted. Side quest upgraded to main quest. After fully supporting his new path, she gently changes the subject, resting one hand on the table. In a much softer voice, she asks whether his recent cold behavior was part of acting practice. Do-hyun immediately understands what she means. He quietly answers yes. The tension visibly melts away. He explains that he believed the best approach was to immerse himself completely in his character's mindset. Thinking everything through, his mother softly concludes that his hostile personality had simply been part of the performance. Relief finally replaces weeks of worry. She places a hand over her chest and lets out a long sigh of gratitude. Do-hyun is slightly taken aback when she admits she genuinely feared he was dealing with something far more serious. After dinner, she asks for the director's phone number so they can arrange a meeting and discuss the details of her son's contract. Hearing that, Do-hyun simply falls silent. Only then does he realize just how deeply his mother had been worrying about him all this time. With his head lowered, Do-hyun walks through the dim hallway, quietly thinking about the warmth and genuine care waiting for him at home. The next morning arrives beneath a bright blue sky dotted with fluffy white clouds. He carefully slides open the classroom door and immediately spots his blonde classmate sitting at the desk ahead. Making his way over, he offers a greeting. The replies from both friends are brief, stiff, and neither of them bothers meeting his eyes. Yep, the friendship Wi-Fi is definitely disconnected. Confused by the strange atmosphere, Do-hyun glances back. The girl instantly turns her face away the moment their eyes almost meet. As he settles into his seat, he can't ignore how uncomfortable they seem around him. He quietly wonders when they started avoiding him. His fingers nervously fidget beneath the desk. Should he ask what's wrong? He considers apologizing if he somehow hurt them. At the same time, a darker thought creeps in. Maybe they simply hate him now. An old memory suddenly surfaces. The three of them are laughing together during what Do-hyun remembers as an incredibly unusual month. In that memory, he smiles with his eyes closed, admitting he never imagined he'd grow accustomed to receiving so much affection. Me too, buddy. Pulled back into reality, he convinces himself that loneliness is only natural after losing his brother. Soon, music notes fill the classroom blackboard as the teacher tells everyone to split into small groups. Taking charge, the blonde girl suggests assigning instruments for the class performance. The others immediately agree. Relieved, she starts asking what everyone already knows how to play. The blonde boy quietly chooses the keyboard without really looking at anyone. The girl says she's comfortable with both piano and acoustic guitar. Do-hyun stares at the sheet music in front of him. He wants to answer, but the words won't come. Then an image appears in his mind. Someone gracefully playing the violin, surrounded by an almost magical glow. Too bad that's his brother's skill tree. The vision fades. With a disappointed expression, Do-hyun admits the violin belonged to his brother, while he himself doesn't know how to play anything. Trying to help, the girl suggests the recorder or the xylophone, since both are easy for beginners. He settles on the recorder. His friend happily approves the choice. Almost immediately afterward, the teacher announces the activity is over and tells everyone to rearrange the classroom before dismissal. The girl quietly pushes her chair back. Watching her, Do-hyun can't hide the sadness in his eyes. Outside, sunlight filters gently through the trees as green leaves sway beneath the clear sky. The three friends walk together along the sidewalk. Technically together, emotionally, several business days apart. Anxiously, Do-hyun sneaks glances toward the other two, hoping for any kind of reaction. Instead, all he sees are their backs growing farther away as the mood turns painfully heavy. Eventually, he stops walking altogether. The silence breaks only when his missing footsteps are noticed. Nicholas spins around. Already fed up, he blurts out that Do-hyun is driving him insane. Well, someone finally used the dialogue option. The sudden explosion leaves Do-hyun frozen, his eyes widening in shock. Nicholas demands to know why his attitude changed so drastically. He complains that Do-hyun always trails behind them like he's afraid to get close. With Jin standing nearby, Nicholas keeps venting. He insists Do-hyun has been acting unbelievably strange. Drawing a deep breath, he struggles to keep his anger under control. Meanwhile, Jin watches nervously, clearly intimidated by the confrontation. Do-hyun's face turns completely pale. Before he can even respond, Nicholas points straight at him and continues his rant in the middle of the sidewalk. He bluntly tells Do-hyun to stop standing there in silence and finally say whatever's on his mind. Cornered by his own silence. Classic. Clenching his hands, Do-hyun realizes his plan to quietly endure everything was a complete mistake. He remembers the casual lunches they used to share. All he'd wanted was for things to stay exactly like that, exchanging simple greetings with the friends he'd come to treasure. Reality crashes down on him. A shadow falls across his face as he quietly sighs. Deep inside, he admits he'd been forcing himself to believe he was already used to living alone. Nicholas doesn't look away. He simply waits, anxious for an answer. Gathering his courage, Do-hyun finally speaks. He quietly asks whether he really did something wrong. Nicholas immediately loses his patience again. He asks if this whole thing is supposed to be some kind of cruel joke. Thankfully, Jin steps in before things spiral further. Much calmer, she asks why Do-hyun would even ask a question like that. With a sorrowful expression, he explains that he'd sensed their discomfort for a long time but never understood its cause. He apologizes, admitting he was too scared to bring it up sooner. His confession leaves both classmates speechless. Plot twist, everyone's been reading the wrong script. Do-hyun's eyes widen when they finally explain what they believed. They honestly thought he had started hating them. They remind him that he used to be warm and approachable. Then, almost overnight, he became cold, expressionless, and constantly irritated. Hearing that, Do-hyun remembers every distant reply he gave whenever they tried to help him. Jin gently adds that his silence and permanently annoyed expression convinced everyone he couldn't stand being around them. The truth hits like a truck. Do-hyun finally realizes just how badly his attempt to distance himself had been misunderstood. At that moment, he remembers his mother's relieved sigh after she confessed how worried she'd been about him. Everything suddenly makes sense. He finally understands why she reacted that way, and just how deeply his own behavior had hurt the people who genuinely cared about him. Staring at the pale stone pavement beneath his feet, Do-hyun finally realizes the solution had been surprisingly simple all along. A memory surfaces of an older man once explaining how difficult it is to change another person's heart. Then another memory crashes in. A younger Do-hyun sobs alone in a hospital gown, desperately waiting for an answer that never comes. His parents had already returned to Korea. He was left behind in that hospital room by himself. Yeah, childhood really chose nightmare difficulty. Back in the present, he quietly looks at Nicholas and Jin. Only now does he fully appreciate how much kindness they've shown him. The realization hits hard. These days, even the smallest change in his behavior is enough for people to notice he's hurting. Looking down at his shoes, he finally understands what it feels like to have people who genuinely care about his heart. So he apologizes again, this time without holding anything back. Dropping every trace of pride, Do-hyun openly admits he was wrong and makes peace with his friends right there on the sidewalk. With his head lowered, he sincerely accepts full responsibility. For a few seconds, Nicholas and Jin simply stare at him in stunned silence. Then Nicholas lets out a small, relieved smile. The tension that's been hanging over the three of them finally begins to disappear. Friendship HP restored. Nicholas accepts the apology. Still, he warns Do-hyun not to let something like this happen again. If there were a next time, their friendship might not survive it. The easy forgiveness catches Do-hyun completely off guard. His eyes widen as he asks himself if they've really forgiven him. Nicholas answers with a warm smile. Their friendship matters too much to throw away over one mistake. Do-hyun lifts his eyes toward the blue sky. Once more, he apologizes. Then he quietly thanks them. As they continue walking, Jin laughs and says he'd been acting like an entirely different person. She casually reveals that Nicholas had actually searched online about spirit possession. Bro thought the patch notes included demons. Nicholas immediately tries to deny it. Unfortunately for him, Jin saw his search history. That confession leaves him red-faced, especially after admitting he never realized what was actually happening. Jin steps a little closer. Curiosity gets the better of her. As politely as possible, she asks what really caused his bizarre behavior. Do-hyun calmly explains that it was all preparation for acting. He tells them about the audition he had the previous week. To fully connect with the character in such a short time, he immersed himself so deeply in the role that it spilled into real life. Method acting really said, no off switch. Nicholas stares at him in disbelief. All that drama was acting? Do-hyun apologizes yet again. This time, Nicholas simply sighs with relief now that the mystery has finally been solved. Then he immediately asks the question that matters. Did he pass the audition? Do-hyun gives a quiet nod. His calm expression never changes as he looks at both of them. That single nod sends his friends into full celebration mode. They stop walking altogether and bombard him with questions about every detail of the audition. Their mouths literally drop open at the same time. Perfect synchronization. Jin says the whole story sounds incredible. Meanwhile, Do-hyun apologizes one more time for everything he'd put them through. Nicholas immediately cuts him off. Looking down at the ground, he asks whether all that regret is actually genuine. Then he proposes a way to prove it. Invite both of them over to his house. With a mischievous grin, Nicholas raises the stakes. Why stop there? They should get to use the giant swimming pool too. Priorities, respect. Jin immediately calls him a pool addict. Nicholas complains that it's completely unfair they've never once been invited to Do-hyun's house. Crossing his arms, he waits for an answer. Both friends lean toward Do-hyun, practically begging for permission to come over. Watching them argue so passionately makes Do-hyun smile. It's small, but completely genuine. He shyly asks whether it would really be okay if they came over today. The answer is yes. Nicholas practically launches himself into the air with excitement after realizing they're actually going swimming at their rich friend's house. Watching them celebrate so happily fills Do-hyun's heart with warmth. He quietly admits to himself that he should have invited them much sooner if something so simple could make them this happy. Sometimes the true endgame boss is just communication. Later that evening, his mother finally returns home. She slowly opens the front door, looking a little tired with her bag still in hand. Walking into the brightly lit hallway, she notices Do-hyun almost immediately. Softly, she asks if he'd already gotten home. Dressed comfortably, he walks toward her with obvious hesitation. He clearly has something he wants to say. Standing with both hands in front of him, he apologizes once again. His mother blinks in confusion, completely caught off guard by the unexpected apology. She has no idea what prompted it. Do-hyun explains that his acting practice caused her unnecessary worry because he changed so much without warning her first. His honesty strikes straight at her heart. Her cheeks flush as emotion fills her face. She thanks him for thinking about her feelings. Then she smiles warmly and tells him how proud she is. Mom just unlocked the proud parent achievement. Do-hyun asks if that constant worry was the reason she'd been acting so cautiously around him. He reassures her that everything is truly fine now. His mother beams with relief. To celebrate, she suggests going out for dinner together. She tells him to get ready. Then she asks him to call his father too, saying he's been worried as well and will probably get emotional. Later, mother and son sit across from one another inside a bright restaurant, enjoying dinner together. Do-hyun quietly eats while listening to her cheerful conversation. She wears a gentle, affectionate smile the entire time. In that moment, she couldn't look happier. The following day, the story shifts back to school as the classroom door slowly begins to open. The moment Jin notices Do-hyun walking into the classroom, she spins around in her chair with a huge grin. He happily waves at both of his friends and wishes them a bright, cheerful good morning. As he pulls out his chair to sit down, he quietly breathes a sigh of relief. Everything finally seems back to normal. Character development patch successfully installed. Jin suddenly stands up, apologizes in a hurry, and says she needs to speak with a friend in the classroom next door. A second later, Nicholas stretches with both hands behind his neck and announces he's heading to the bathroom. Just like that, Do-hyun is left sitting alone. He slowly lowers the hand he'd raised, completely confused. Looking around at the empty desks, he starts wondering if things really have gone back to normal, because this feels suspiciously like he's being avoided again. PTSD said, Round 2. Trying not to overthink it, he lowers his head and tells himself they're probably just busy. Then, tap, tap. A faint knocking sound comes from the classroom window. Curious, he turns toward the noise. Outside the window stand Jin and Nicholas, both staring directly at him. Now that's one way to make an entrance. Do-hyun walks over and slides the window open with a puzzled expression. Jin greets him with a huge closed-lip smile. Beside her, Nicholas wears the most suspicious grin imaginable. Do-hyun's eyes drift downward. They're both holding something, flowers, and a tiny blueberry pie with a single candle burning in the center. His classmates immediately urge him to hurry before the candle melts away. Blushing bright red, Do-hyun gently blows out the flame. Congratulations instantly erupt from the students gathered nearby. Nicholas immediately starts tossing handfuls of flower petals through the open window. Bro brought the celebration DLC. Watching everything unfold, Do-hyun rubs at his eyes. Nicholas notices immediately and teases him, asking if he's about to cry. Smiling through the emotion, Do-hyun quickly insists he isn't. Then he laughs. A soft, genuine laugh escapes as he covers part of his face with one hand. Seeing how much he loved the surprise, the two blonde troublemakers threaten to throw even more things at him. Naturally, that's when disaster clocks in for work. An adult hand suddenly grabs Nicholas by the head. He lets out an immediate scream. The principal stands behind him, absolutely furious over all the noise. Even worse, those flowers belong to him. The poor man mourns his precious plants now scattered across the floor. Without the slightest mercy, he grabs Nicholas by the ear. Community service for everyone. Speed run to detention completed. Do-hyun quickly steps in, explaining that the flowers were used for a good reason, and promising they could simply plant new ones. As the principal drags Nicholas away by the ear, the blonde boy keeps shouting for Do-hyun to enjoy both the pie and the flowers. Left behind, Do-hyun quietly holds the dessert. He simply stands there, trying to process the chaos that just happened. Silence settles over the classroom. Then the little flower resting on his head slowly slips to the floor. Picking it up, he gently inhales its fragrance. His glowing eyes shift toward the little pie. A faint smile curls across his face. Some moments are worth every bit of chaos. Outside the school, laughter echoes beneath the warm afternoon sky. As punishment for the flower incident, the three friends spend the afternoon kneeling in the garden, replanting flowers under supervision. Nicholas grumbles non-stop about how unbelievably boring this is. Do-hyun disagrees. He actually thinks it's fun. Only this guy could enjoy punishment. Nicholas suddenly remembers something much more important. He happily tells Jin that his mother finally gave him permission yesterday. Then he invites both friends to spend the rest of the day at Do-hyun's house. Holding a shovel, Do-hyun smiles brightly. He suggests using the visit to get plenty of music practice done for their school assignment. Before anyone can answer, a dark-skinned student approaches with a friendly smile. He cheerfully greets the trio. Then he jokingly calls Jin Juliet and asks where her Romeo is. The three friends glance around, trying to figure out who he's talking about. Nicholas gets it immediately. Laughing so hard he can barely breathe, he points straight at Do-hyun. Do-hyun answers with nothing but the flattest stare imaginable. The petal shower from earlier apparently created unexpected consequences. The newcomer explains that everyone started calling Do-hyun Romeo because he accepted flowers from the blonde girl. Congratulations, new title unlocked. Bright red with embarrassment, Do-hyun grips his gardening tool tighter and silently prays for the joke to die. Later that afternoon, the brilliant blue sky stretches above his family's enormous mansion. Dressed comfortably, Do-hyun heads downstairs through the elegant glass staircase with obvious excitement. Waiting outside, Nicholas and Jin greet him with huge smiles while carrying bags packed with snacks. The three head inside together. Nicholas immediately starts sprinting through the luxurious entrance hall in search of the swimming pool. Bro skipped the house tour and went straight to the objective marker. Jin pulls out the printed sheet music and casually asks about Do-hyun's family. He explains that his mother had to leave for work early. Meanwhile, miles away, she's buried under mountains of paperwork at the office, comically crying because she couldn't stay home to welcome the kids. Do-hyun leads his guests upstairs to his spotless bedroom. The blonde pair are amazed by how incredibly neat everything is. Soon the three of them are sitting comfortably on the floor, carefully studying the sheet music for their upcoming music presentation. Watching his friends beside him, Do-hyun quietly closes his eyes. A peaceful smile naturally spreads across his face. This is exactly the kind of happiness he'd been searching for. Once the studying wraps up, Nicholas wastes absolutely zero time. He dives straight into the massive indoor pool. Zero hesitation. Maximum splash damage. Jin jumps into the water after him, immediately complaining about how rough he's playing. Standing at the poolside, Do-hyun simply watches his friends having fun with a quiet smile. Keeping his dark zip-up on, Do-hyun cautiously steps into the pool, flinching as the cool water slowly climbs over him. His friends toss a ball around before calling him to the deep end, only for him to admit, "I actually can't swim." Talk about unlocking the hardest difficulty first. Ever the volunteer coach, Nicholas confidently tells him to stop hugging the pool wall and trust the water. Do-hyun clings even tighter, insisting he's terrified of sinking, while Nicholas assures him the human body naturally floats. Putting his faith in that advice, he nervously lets go. Instant regret DLC unlocked. Instead of floating, he drops straight down like a stone, forcing Nicholas to rush in and pull him back up. Dripping wet with a metaphorical storm cloud hanging over his head, Do-hyun grumbles that athletic talent clearly skipped him. Trying to cheer him up, Jin asks for swimming lessons too, giving Nicholas 2 students instead of 1. Bro accidentally accepted a side quest. An hour later, the self-appointed instructor folds his arms, completely worn out from the non-stop coaching. Meanwhile, Do-hyun floats with only his nose above the surface, blowing bubbles in pure frustration. His friends encourage him with, "Nobody's good at everything," before immediately bringing back the Romeo jokes. The teasing flips the mood when Nicholas suddenly freezes, staring at Do-hyun in disbelief. Anime protagonist mode activated. Wrapped in pure determination, Do-hyun clenches his fists and loudly declares that he's going to swim. Neither friend has ever seen him this fired up over anything. Without another word, he lunges into the pool, pushing through the blue water with everything he's got. His cheeks puff with held breath as he forces himself forward, slicing through the surface. But underwater, his trembling arms reveal the ugly truth. His weak body can't keep up with his determined mind. Running out of strength, he rises gasping for air, silently wondering why he seems so untalented physically. Then something changes. Standing still in the water, he turns his head as his eyes suddenly light up at an incredible sight. Tiny glimmers dance across the shimmering reflections covering the pool. Yeah, this stopped being a swimming lesson real fast. Completely captivated, he reaches toward the glowing currents and his imagination forms a clear path flowing through the water. Breathing hard, he finally climbs out while Nicholas and Jin stare at him in stunned silence. Still riding the adrenaline, he taps his chest with confidence, gives a quick wink, then casually walks away from the pool. Bro exited like the credits were rolling. A second later, the younger boy erupts with excitement, shouting that Do-hyun actually pulled it off after they doubted him. Heart pounding, Do-hyun grips the pool's edge and quietly wonders if he really swam that entire distance. As evening arrives, the friends say cheerful goodbyes before heading home. Back in his room, Do-hyun sits on the edge of his bed, replaying everything that happened in the pool. Studying his own hand, he can't shake the strange sensation that he somehow perceived the movement of the water itself. Then a glowing, colorful sphere suddenly appears, flooding the room with brilliant light. Totally normal Tuesday evening. Shielding his eyes, he watches the floating orb carefully. The glowing being introduces itself as Mr. Bubble, and calmly says they need to talk. Seeing that Do-hyun isn't even that surprised, the orb drifts across the rug and offers to explain exactly what happened at the pool. Recalling the experience, Do-hyun admits it felt as though he could literally see the current flowing. The floating light asks whether he remembers their first meeting, explaining that both experiences came from the same source. As the explanation continues, Do-hyun learns that every living soul is formed from an element known as chi. Surrounded by sparkling lights, he hears that his own soul is incomplete because of a tiny flaw in its structure. Sitting quietly on the bed, he asks why that defect exists. Mr. Bubble simply answers that nothing in existence is ever truly perfect. Do-hyun quickly realizes the energy he perceived while swimming must have been chi flowing through the water, and the orb confirms he's correct. His eyes widen as the glowing entity calmly explains that he accomplished something ordinary people simply cannot. People with complete souls are too perfectly balanced to perceive that hidden energy. Because of his birth defect and because his soul recently connected with another fragmented one, he alone gained the ability to see it. Kind of a bizarre superpower origin story, but we'll take it. The orb warns that mastering this vision won't be easy, prompting Do-hyun to ask how he can experience it again. The answer is almost painfully simple. Focus. Do-hyun stares in disbelief, clearly expecting something a little more dramatic. He lowers his eyes, rubbing his chin while thinking over everything he's just learned. Getting his attention again, Mr. Bubble suggests this gift may grow into something far greater than merely seeing chi. Do-hyun asks for practical examples, but the glowing guide says he'll have to discover the limits of the ability through his own experiments. Gripping his leg thoughtfully, he begins wondering if one day he'll be able to manipulate that mysterious energy instead of only perceiving it. Outside the family's luxurious home, his phone suddenly lights up with a message inviting him to attend the auditions for the role of Isaiah. And that's where part 1 wraps up. Go ahead, drop a like and comment part 2. Your comment helps push the video to more people on YouTube. I'll also leave 2 recommended videos from the channel that you'll probably enjoy. That's it for today, thanks for watching, and see you next time.